Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome back to the stream. So I'm excited to be with you all today. Planet Scale very generously gives us a day off each Friday, first Friday of the month. So I am hanging out, was just doing some chores, and it seems like it'd be a good time to stream. So the game plan for today is to work on the vsock package. We started cleaning this up, I want to say in December, I think. It's kind of a blur, my time off work, but so we started working on this, and I never ended up totally finishing it or tagging it 1.0. So we're going to do that today, I think. I just like to, I guess, figure out a couple of minor details. I think we're going to need to break the API just a little bit to make things easier, but that's okay. This package has been in use for a long time, and I think that it's probably about time to just declare it stable. Like, the API has not changed in a significant way. We implement the netcon interface properly. Things are pretty much good to go. So, yeah, welcome. Hey, how you doing, Gary Onion? Welcome to the stream. So, yeah, let's see here. You know, every time I stream, I've done this a number of times now, probably 20 or 30 times at least. I've got this checklist of stuff here, and I always feel like I'm missing something, but OBS keeps my settings pretty well. Stuff's committed to Git. Okay, the PC output's muted, so I don't get DMCA'd if I play music, which is good. Let's see here. I don't know what I want to listen to. About that. All right, yeah, that'll be on the screen. I might have to adjust that really quick. Always getting the audio started and stuff is a bit of a pain. Yeah, so something else exciting today is that we have the chance to potentially unbox my new hard drives on stream. So that would be pretty cool. So check this. Yeah, so I got the source code for that. I did switch to GitHub dark mode. I tweeted about that earlier today, so that's pretty cool. But I also wanted to mention, let's see, yeah, the hard drives. Yeah, so this is going to get bright again, I'm sorry. Seagate Exos X18. So I was shopping around a little bit, and basically what it kind of comes down to is, for some reason, it's fine, it's a guest browser, I guess. I don't really understand this. So when it comes to Seagate and their drives, they have the Iron Wolf and the Iron Wolf Pros, which are like their NAS drives and their Pro NAS. But then they have Exos, and Exos is their enterprise grade, like 2.5 million hours mean time between failures. Like, these things are crazy. And for some reason, like, the Exos drives are basically as cheap as the Iron Wolf Pros, or sometimes cheaper. So it's like, I just picked up 4 of the X18s here for my new ZFS pool, and they were like, I want to say $320 a piece. The 16 terabyte version of the X16 series would have been, I think, like $290. So they were roughly $30 more expensive a piece. If you try to jump to the X20s, so for example, Linus from Linus Tech Tips just jumped to the X20s for his new petabyte NAS, which is pretty cool. Those are 500 some US dollars a piece. So the X18s were $200 less for 2 terabytes less. So it's like, all right, I guess I'm doing those. So that's exciting. I have not run a Seagate drive in a very long time. Way back in the day, 2009, I bought one of the original 1.5 terabyte Seagate drives, and I had it die on me at least twice. It was very fast, but I had one die, got it RMA'd, had another one die, and eventually just gave up. So I've been all in on WD for years. However, there was a bit of a thing in the community where WD was starting to put the shingled magnetic recording technology in some of their cheaper drives. So that was something they were not advertising to consumers, and just not great. And Reds remain pretty expensive. Red Pros are even more expensive. And Golds, which I believe are their data center drive, are even more expensive. So some friends had pretty good luck with the Exos drives. They seem to be quite competitive as far as price goes, reliable, good speeds. I'm going to be jumping from, I think my current Reds are 5,400 RPM, 8 terabytes, to 18 terabytes, 7,200 RPM, which is pretty cool. So it should be a lot of fun. So I'm very excited for that. So I guess we'll see if FedEx actually shows up. It would be cool to open one up on stream, but I have no idea what time FedEx is coming. So the delivery information just says on FedEx vehicle for delivery. And I'm really hoping they don't want a signature, because I'm going to be really annoyed. Anyway, so we will see, but I'm pretty excited for my new hard drives. So back to the Go code. Right. So kind of where we left off with this. Let's see here. I'm actually going to get rid of this hoodie for now. You're missing pizza on the checklist. Yeah, we're not doing a pizza stream. Sorry, buddy. I lied to you. There's a long-running joke among some of my friends that they want me to do a pizza stream where I compare different types of pizza. And some friends and I did like a pizza taste test. We bought 6 of the 6 different brands of like, basically delivery cheap pizza, and Little Caesars won the comparison. A blind taste test, no joke. It was pretty shocking. I think second place was like Hungry Howie's or something. I'm a bad friend. Yeah, you're right. I am. Anyway, so kind of where we're at with this. I had been working on replacing this with the socket package. So essentially, in order to properly implement netcon or netpacketcon in Go, there is an awful lot you have to do to make that work. It kind of involves like you set up your socket, you have to make sure you set certain flags that comply with things like Go routines well, so things like close on exec, I forget all the details. You want to hook into the runtime network poller because that gives you epoll for free on Linux, and that also gives you the ability to set deadlines on your types, which is important, so for network connections. Beyond that, yeah, you have to have the syscall-con interfaces to, so for example, if you're implementing the read from or write to for a packet con, you need to map those to a system call. So something like receive message, send message, etc. And basically there's just kind of like a lot of knowledge to make this work. So what I ended up doing, I have this library I call socket. So github.com/mdlayer socket provides this high level, go away, it provides this type called a socket con. So a socket con is a low-level network connection which integrates with Go's runtime network poller to provide asynchronous I/O and deadline support. The TLDR basically is this package is everything I have learned about building netcons on Linux. So this is what's currently being used to back my netlink package. I am porting vsock over to it as well. And then eventually I've got a couple of other packages, like for example, the raw package, which I believe I'm going to essentially rewrite for packetsock specifically for Linux because the BSD support is really weird and doesn't quite fit. And that was my first attempt at any of this anyway. So this package takes everything I have learned, and there's a lot. So for example, let's find something here. All of this. So if you want to open a socket with a socket system call, you're supposed to specify close on exec. But guess what? Some OSs don't support that, so you have to call this close on exec manually. Or, the system call might get interrupted, or it might, the kernel version might be too old to support some flags. So you have to acquire this fork lock and try again. It's just this whole thing. And basically, I was able to copy a lot of this knowledge from what I've learned from the standard library and break it out into this own package. So this type, if you create a socket con, it is already integrated with the runtime network poller. You basically use it like you would any other syscall API. So you're supposed to guard it with like build tags and such. But once you actually do that, you get support for all the things like deadlines, epoll for free, which is really nice. I have some high-level wrappers in here. So for example, like I have an accept method. This will wrap over accept or accept for. It'll pass all the flags for you. It will make sure that things actually complete. Another one, so connect here. Certain operating systems, if you try and run connect, it'll say, oh, this is already being established, but that doesn't, it's not a useful error you want to return to a caller. So I just kind of took all the lessons I learned here and compressed them into this package. So this does a lot, and it takes a lot of the complexity out of higher level things. So enough about the socket package. Let's go back to vsock. So where we left off, let's see here. So vsock rewrite on top of socket con, December 15th, sounds about right. And then December 16th, I bumped to version 0.11 because we added shutdown support, I think. So I'm actually not sure if we did that or not, but let's take a look. So kind of where I'm at this point is that the minimum supported Go version, I think, is going to be 1.12 because that's the one that gives us all of the support for things like integrating with the runtime network poller, syscall con, etc. So 1.12 definitely is going to be the minimum. I think vsock is, or not vsock, netlink is now 1.13 because I wanted to use the errors package. So I'm not totally sure. I wanted to take a look here. Expected an error. So this is for not 1.12. So we can actually drop this now because we're not going to support 1.11 at all. Because in order to support 1.10, 1.11, it was nasty. So this test can totally go away, which is great. Hoorah! Welcome to the stream. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and just totally drop this file, which is great. 1.11 test. Okay. 1.12 test. So the 1.11 test can be dropped as well, which is cool. So integration test, Linux. This will actually, if you have the vsock module loaded on your machine, this will actually like load it up and create paired VM sockets connections. So when I originally worked on this, I don't know if this was an oversight on my part or something that was added later on, but you actually had to run these integration tests using both a hypervisor and a virtual machine, and actually, using the vsock channel between the two. So I guess taking a step back here, the way vsock works is it is an in-memory transport between a hypervisor and its virtual machines. So you could have a VM with no network access, but you could have, for example, a netcon here based on vsock, and then the VM would be able to, for example, proxy things like HTTP directly through the hypervisor, and then, of course, the hypervisor could do filtering or network access or whatever else. So pretty cool. This is something that we did experiment with, at least briefly, at DigitalOcean. I'm not sure if it's being used there today, but this is actually being deployed in production contexts as part of things like LXD from Canonical, and I believe actually some of the Chromium OS stuff is using my vsock package as well. So this is seeing a bit of traction, which is pretty cool. So I would like to, again, just take this, kind of modernize it, release a 1.0, and that way folks can use this with confidence, because things really haven't changed a whole lot. And integrating the socket con type is going to take away a lot of the complexity. Why would you not want a network interface? Yeah, honestly, good question. I guess that the demo we did once for DigitalOcean, we spun up very small virtual machines without networking, and we used them each to do like a computing job, essentially. So I don't know. I guess hypothetically, let's say, for example, like you have some very restricted workload that will never need network access, but you want to isolate it in a virtual machine. You could pass commands back and forth using this in-memory channel rather than using a network interface. So I'm not sure. It's possible that this is not necessary, or this could be useful for things like your metadata agents or similar that typically run on VMs. Is this socket lighter? Well, it doesn't need an entire TCP IP stack, so I would assume so, yes. I think that essentially it's just kind of your virtual network interface is in memory too, right? Yes, but the virtual network interface still has to do things like construct Ethernet frames, construct IP packets, do ARP, do neighbor discovery, construct TCP streams, etc. So I think technically this would be lighter because vsock is just a simple, reliable transport, in memory. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, that's my understanding anyway. Frankly, I'm not an expert on the implementation details. I'm just a consumer. Dominic is here. What's going on? Hide your bugs. I'm here. Yeah. Let's see. Static check. Hey, we're good. No bugs yet, right? I wanted to rename these files because we no longer need these tags. So I want to combine these actually. So all of these can be combined into the other file because we no longer need the tags. So we have the context ID, net test, con, listener, vsock pipe. I suppose we'll put it above the net test stuff. So the X packages have this very useful, I'll just show you all. Access, so cool. Golang net. Hey, what's going on, Metal Matza? Good to see you here. Welcome to the stream. So within XNet, there's this library called nettest, and this is very useful. So effectively what this does is there's this top-level constructor called netcon, or testcon, and you provide a makepipe function. So effectively what you do is you provide this library with a function that will create two netcons which are paired to each other, so they will send data back and forth, a function to stop them, and then the ability to return an error if one occurs. Basically what this allows is that the netcon interface is kind of complicated, and actually getting it right, all the subtle details, all the errors and stuff is very hard. So if you can put your type, for example, my vsock con through testcon, then I have pretty high confidence that it's going to work pretty well for things like HTTP, gRPC, etc. Anything that could run over a reliable stream in that way. So pretty cool stuff. This is a very useful library for sure. And actually, at one point, there was a change list open. Here we go. So this test uses the nettest test listener API, which is being built in this CL. But we have to skip it for now because this doesn't actually exist. So I think last time I knew, Miki Ohara, a longtime contributor to Go networking specifically, was working on the CL, but Mikio hasn't been around for a while. So I was actually going to essentially take that and just take it over, generalize it a little bit from my use case, and then just try and get it landed in the standard library or in the X packages. Frankly, I had just kind of forgotten. So yeah, this is something that we should do though, because it would be nice, because this verifies that given a listener, you're able to get connections out of it and then actually send them back and forth. So pretty cool stuff. So really quick, we just moved a bunch of tests into this file. I probably broke something, so let's get rid of this old file we no longer need. Goodbye. And let's give this a run. Oh, shoot, I just did the control. Yeah. You know, it's so funny. We had a stream a couple months ago where I kept hitting Control S in my terminal and like freezing it. And then you press Control Q to undo that. And I had been using Linux for, you know, since 2009, I think. And I had no idea that you could do that for my first 12 years using Linux. So it's like, whatever. Yeah, all the tests seem to pass. That is a good sign, I suppose. So for example, yeah, you can see here, test integration, net test, test con. So basic IO, ping pong, racy read, racy write, like all of these things work, which means that we have properly implemented the netcon interface, which is good because you need a proper netcon in order to run things like gRPC. Pretty cool. Now that I think about it, hang on one sec, mdlayer.com. I believe at one point I had done, yes. So I had done a blog a long time ago. I am sure there is some outdated information in this, but this discusses like kind of like what I learned about vsock. Basically, you need a new enough kernel. You got to mod probe the modules. You can run a QEMU device. Unix socket. Yeah, so this is all blocking sockets, blocking bind, blocking listen. So things have improved considerably since I wrote this in 2017. But that being said, this blog could still be useful for some background. So check that out. Connection-oriented socket, local context ID. Yeah, this was a while ago. Hi, hope for the best for your new job. Yeah, it's been really great so far. I'm very excited. I knew that when I was job hunting this time around, I really wanted to work for smaller company, smaller team, have a lot of autonomy and agency in my work. And I believe that so far I'm getting that really well at PlanetScale. So yeah, I'm super happy. It's only been 2 weeks, you know, so still some time to go, but I've been having a really good time. My teammates are really great. I'm very excited about the work, very excited about the company, and I'm learning a ton. So all in all, a good fit, you know. Sure, you're just back to working with Fatih, aren't you? Yes, Fatih is my teammate, which is great. So Fatih and I had originally interacted in the Go community, and I believe I actually talked to him originally about, he asked me about DigitalOcean, he had some questions. So we worked together at DigitalOcean, but never on the same team. And then eventually I left DigitalOcean for Fastly. I believe Fatih went to GitHub. But yeah, now we're both at PlanetScale, which is pretty cool, and we're teammates, so that's a lot of fun. Taryn, welcome back. Thank you so much for the 21 months of subscription. That is awesome. I certainly appreciate that, my friend. Thank you so much. I just remembered, I woke up this morning, I had a cup of coffee, and I wanted a chance to wait a little bit and have some this afternoon, so I'll probably need to make coffee in the next hour or so. That'll take like 5 minutes, but I can always start the kettle and come shoot the shit, so that'll be fun. One more thing I wanted to show before I forgot. So we have the vsock blog. I also did a talk on it. So I did a talk at GopherCon UK in 2019 called Building a Netcon Type from the Ground Up. And that basically, here's the talk, here's the slides. That also predates, well, I suppose I can pull up the slides. This also predates the socket package. So this talks about some of the things I had to do, for example, let's see here. Yeah, so kind of like, you know, how package.net fits together, how you actually open up like a non-blocking socket, how you integrate with the runtime network polar. Hang on, is there something, other socket types, AF vsock? Yeah, so check this out. I think this was a cool talk. I basically talked about every single thing I learned about creating netcon types in Go, and yeah, so this is cool. And then basically I've taken a lot of that knowledge these days and put it into the socket package. So take a look at this. This could be pretty cool to check out as well. But yeah, let's get back to the code for a sec here too. Dominic asks, any Rust in your new job? I don't believe so at the moment. Certainly, if there are opportunities where it made sense, I would be interested. But that being said, introducing another tool chain is always a bit of a endeavor. I do like Rust a lot. I think it's a really interesting language, and I'm planning on doing, continuing to do side projects with it. And personally, I think that Rust and Go will be great complements in my toolkit for years to come. We may potentially get into some Rust later. I don't know for sure yet. I'm planning on pretty much going until a large data bank starts streaming around 3 o'clock, so we got about 2.5 hours. I suppose we'll see. Taryn might not be able to stay the whole stream. You're supposed to be getting coffee in a bit. Yeah, no worries, man. I appreciate you stopping by. And of course, thank you for the subscription. So, okay, all of this seems to work. Let's go ahead and commit what we've done so far because we are able to delete some old files. So, vsock consolidate old, consolidate integration tests, remove less than 1.12 support. Do I advertise in this package anywhere? I think I do. So, for example, in the README, it probably says, yeah, varying levels of functionality depending on the version of Go used during compilation. Yeah, this was, hang on a sec. Let's pull up the Go doc here. The TLDR is, if you were, if you're using Go 1.10 or 1.11, things would work, but in a pretty degraded state. So I get to erase this entire paragraph now because I am just making the decision that we only support 1.12 because everything else is just not worth it. I know for a while there was some Ubuntu LTS shipping an older version of Go, I believe Go 1.10, and they asked to reintroduce support into the package. So I think perhaps what I will do is I'll just 1.12 is still very generous. Yeah. But I feel like I really want to tidy things up for 1.0. So probably what I will do is I will leave a link that says like use the latest unstable commit if you need Go 1.10 or Go 1.11 support. But at this point, we have Go 1.17 out. Go 1.18 is imminent. It's time to upgrade, even if you're on LTS. Very generous indeed. 1.12 was very generous. Yeah. Debian still ships some ancient version. I'm not surprised. Support 1.16 or older if they pay you. Yeah. I frankly, I don't think I'd even gonna want to accept a pull request anymore for it. I think that the package is so much tidier if I can just use socket, and I think socket depends on one. Let's find out. Whatever socket supports, I guess, is what I can support. So Go 1.12. Do I have this? No. Also, the tests at least. So the tests use errors is. So socket will build on 1.12. Sponsor only access to private repos. It's a great opportunity. It sounds like the business model of some big companies. Yeah. So this will build on 1.12. It may not test on 1.12. I think that's an okay compromise. Because in my tests, like if somebody's developing this package, like hopefully they're using 1.17. So we're gonna pin this to 1.12. That will be our minimum. The Go mod is set to 1.13. I don't know if that actually matters though. That might just warn people if. Did I adjust that Go mod probably in my previous commit? +1. So let's see here. Git show. So this is what I was on stream a couple months ago. So what happened is I was streaming. And then the holidays came up, and then I got sick, and then I was okay for like a week, and then I got sick again. Like it was this whole thing. So like I started working on my Rust project and stuff, but I basically lost like a month where I was kind of hoping to be streaming a lot. So that's unfortunate. So I'm excited to be with you all today. So the Go mod already said Go 1.13. Interesting. Okay. I don't know. If a test doesn't compile and nobody's there to see it, does the code work? Yes, let's say so. So let's see here. Go 1.12, 1. Well, first let's try 1.11. Build fails. Modular cars 1.17, 1.17. Yeah. Does this build on Go 1.11? It does not. Okay. It builds and tests on Go 1.12. That's what we're saying. We're declaring Go 1.12 because that is the release we need. Actually, I think my vsock presentation, I already lost it. Oops. My vsock presentation actually talks about some of the different things we learned and like kind of how they all fit together. So, was 1.13 the first version that had the Go field and the Go mod? Yes, I think you might be right. Actually, that does sound right. Okay, so push this. We're still at the point where we are focusing on Go 1.12. Okay, so yeah, we've got to do some plumbing for the socket library and such, stability. I'm basically going to copy some of the docs from Netlink because Netlink has some pretty good stability stuff. Let's see here. Pull this up. For those of you who are using my Netlink package, I actually just split out the integration tests into a different Go module. So the Go mod is much tidier now. So if that affects you, if you've ever been annoyed that it pulled in a couple of extra things, upgrade. So README. Stability, we're basically going to copy the same statements over from Netlink. We're going to bump the, oh wow, okay. We're going to copy lots of things over. So 2017, 2022. The Go mod looks so tidy, nice job. Yeah, it's basically just like the XNet stuff I need. No, this is not this one. So Go CMP is just used for tests. The native endian package is just like basically a nice way of like not doing an unsafe check myself. Socket library, net errors. I'm actually not sure why X errors is in there. I feel like this should be gone by now, but oh. Go CMP, compare options. Interesting. I feel like the Go CMP library should just drop support for like less than 1.13 as well, but I don't know what their cycles are. Anyway, so we're going to copy basically a bunch of stuff from Netlink here and just tidy this up. So vsock, we need to... Are we still on source hut? Yeah, okay. So we got to replace with Github Actions too. Okay, so Netlink gets replaced with vsock. I was using source hut for a while. It's still cool for BSD CI, but for Linux, GitHub Actions is just so much easier. Hey, Mark Pash, what's going on? Good to see you. X errors is good for stack traces, right? You've been arguing with yourself about it. X errors, I believe, was the pre-1.13 version of errors is and errors as. So I don't think it's ever supported stack traces, unless perhaps it did at one point and that didn't make it into the final version. But for example, there is github.com/pkg/errors. That is something that supports stack traces. There are different opinions on the topic, you know. My general experience has been I don't really find stack traces necessary, but I don't know. Go version support 1.12. Go away. I need to update this blog link too. So stability. See the changelog. Stable v1 API. Only supported on Go 1.12 plus. Older versions of Go lack critical features and APIs which are necessary for this package to function correctly. Yes, fact. So as far as you know, X errors supports stack traces, but that did not make it into 1.13. Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's news. I suppose, frankly, I had forgotten. But that would make sense, though. So I need to replace that blog link. I've been off Medium for a long time now, actually. So ported everything over to my own blog. So get rid of the paywall and everything for everybody. Requirements. These might be out of date at this point. I don't know for sure. I'm going to get rid of this as well because the VSCP thing is still kind of just like a toy. It's possible these requirements are out of date. PRs are welcome if PRs are welcome. Just for now, I feel like that's pretty reasonable. From X errors, the returned error contains a frame set to the colors location implements formatter to show this information when printed with details, which Dominic thinks is a terrible idea. Yeah, I seem to remember the stack frame stuff being fairly contentious, which I assume is why it didn't go into 1.13, but people seem to have mostly dropped the topic these days, at least that I've seen. Frankly, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to error handling discussions because I'm just not bothered. Like, things are fine, you know. I've written enough Go that I understand the sharp edges. So Okay, README is up to date. We're going to need GitHub Actions as well. So I'm basically going to copy all my GitHub workflows from FreeBSD. So instead of FreeBSD, we'll do a macOS test because GitHub Actions supports that. So we'll get rid of these source hut builds completely. We will paste in the .github directory from netlink.github. Do love me some GitHub Actions. Makes things kind of nice. You like to consider yourself one of the sharp edges. Fair. So Netlink only supports Go 1.13 now. This will still support Go 1.12. That's fine. So we'll do 1.12 and 1.17. 1.13 is nice because of errors is. I don't remember a need for that in vsock though, at least immediately. 1.12, 1.17, check out. Shoot. The integration tests for vsock are very different, so I should not have deleted. Oops. Git. Actually, let's just look at the diff really quick. So we have to mod probe the device and chmod. I don't know if GitHub Actions is going to allow us to do that. I have no idea. Do we think this is going to work? Do we think GitHub Actions supports? Well, I guess if I can add like network namespaces, maybe I can load kernel modules. I suppose we will see, right? So why did I make it 6.6? That seems overly broad, but I guess we want unprivileged users to be able to rewrite. So load the vhost vsock kernel module. It depends on the way your actions run. They have VM runners and container runners. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So I might need to set up a VM runner then. I suppose we'll find out. Change the permissions of dev vsock for integration tests. Actually, I could just run sudo, but I guess I'd rather not if we can avoid it. Run. Okay, load, run, and then just run all the tests with race. Yeah. -v -race. Everything. Can trim some of the fat here. Let's see here. Run integration tests. So test -v. So like all these test integration will pass, skip. Did I use that convention? Yeah, I did. So let's just run the integration tests exclusively. So this is a convention I like. Rather than using a build tag, you do test integration, and then in your CI runner, for example, like if we need dev vsock, we can run with test integration. Makes sense. So this is going to be 1.12, 1.17. Checkout, run. That's it. No vsock device. No privileges. We don't want go fuzz. Yep. That's that. macOS will just run on 1.12 just to make sure that it doesn't actually run. We mostly just want to make sure. So for example, if I do go os darwin, go build. The goal is to make it so that the package builds, even if it doesn't necessarily run, because it's really annoying to have to add build tags around every dependency, So this should work, I would think. And then static analysis, which is 1.17. Check out latest static check. I used to pin static check in my Go mods, but for open source stuff, I'd rather just have the latest version at all times. So I'm doing this now. Seems fine to me. So let's get everything switched really quick. Builds. Is there anything I'm forgetting about GitHub Actions? Like, do I need to... I don't need to like enable it in the repo, right? Just the presence of the files is good enough. So vsock workflows Linux test, which is a workflow we have. So we got the badges. We have the new Go reference badge. We have Go report card, which is a silly thing, but I kind of like it because I think I write good Go. So, and then a change log. We got to get that started too. Okay, so really quick. Don't need that terminal. Don't need this terminal. Okay. I think doing it this way is fine. Having your tools in Go mod feels weird to me. Yeah. Maybe if we had a tools mod, but go install with a tag achieves much the same. Right, that's exactly it. Like there was a little bit where I kept tagging static check and stuff in my Go mod, but it does feel weird to have like, somebody pulls, for example, vsock and they get a check out of X tools. Like that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So a tools mod or something would be nice, yeah. But for the time being, this seems totally okay. I need to open up netlink again because I'm going to copy the changelog. Changelog, markdown, unreleased nothing, 1.0.0, package, vsock that supports Go 112 plus, must use, and unstable release. I feel like that's completely fair at this point. Like it's been 4 years since I authored this pack. 5 years. Shoot. When did I write this? 5 years ago? Are you serious? When was the first commit? Probably the license file would have been 5 years ago. March 9th, 2017. Yeah, it's been 5 years. Holy crap. Wow. That's insane. Doesn't VS Code Go provide static check? The Vim Go would always pull static check. Every decent editor setup runs static check. Yes. My VS Code Go configuration does run it. It still doesn't stop you from doing something silly once in a while, like, use a deprecated function or something unused in like a test. So I run it in CI anyway. It just makes me feel better, And that way also, in case my local copy of static check is out of date and there's some new check that's beneficial, I always get the latest version, Initial stable commit. Yep. Cool. So we're not at 1.0. Well, actually, no, we haven't tagged it. We're still in a branch. So let's see here. So vsock prepare for the 1.0.0 for CI and metadata for, yeah. All right. Not to mention someone might send a PR. Yeah, for sure. For sure. So we are on the rewrite branch because effectively this is a rewrite. The socket package is taking away a lot of old code. Large data bank. Thank you so much for the 18 months, my friend. Thank you. I appreciate that, sock champ. I don't have better Twitch TV or anything, but I'm going to assume that's a pretty good one. So, hey, welcome. It's great to see you here. I look forward to sending you a raid in a couple of hours. We've got some good viewership here today, and it's going to be exciting. It's already been 18 months. Yeah, Terran has 21 months. I didn't think it had been that long either. It's a non-emote. Nice. Yeah, it's been that long. A couple folks have stayed subscribed and such. Certainly you don't have to. I know there have been long periods of time where I haven't streamed, but I certainly really appreciate it. So thank you, my friend. The passing of time worries me. Yeah, absolutely. It's wild. I'm 30 years old all of a sudden, and like it's things are just different. It's pretty cool. So I want to take a look at all these pretty much because this is the one I expect to fail. 112. Listen loop back. Oh, you know what? So what I was talking about earlier about listening to loopback? That may not have existed, when I created this library. So it's possible that the integration tests can only run on 117 because, oh wait, no. The Go version has nothing to do with the kernel version. Maybe the actions kernel is too old. Let's see. It's not the Go version, it's the actions. It would be the actions version. So Ubuntu latest. Is that 2004 or is that 2110? Time for some uname. Yeah. Yep. We'll investigate that. I want to make sure everything else passes first. So is this the macOS build? No, Linux. Okay, so bare Linux works just fine, which is good. Test-race. Skipping vsock device does not exist. Yep. Because the integration tests. Cool. Okay. So it degrades gracefully. It looks like 112 also seems to pass just fine. That's great. The static analysis passes. That's good. So static check, which version do we have out of curiosity? 21.12. Okay. Hey, Dominic, what the heck? 2022. Where's my 2022.00? What am I sponsoring you for anyway? Just kidding. So for those of you who are here, if you're not sponsoring Dominic and you're writing Go, you really should be. It's, his work on static check is incredibly important for the Go ecosystem. And certainly with the work on generics, I frankly feel like it's going to be a huge lift. And he could use your support. The more sponsorships Dominic is able to have, the more he is able to work on open source software, tooling for the Go ecosystem, etc., rather than taking contract work for other companies. So certainly, this is something that's important to me. I've advocated for sponsoring him at my previous companies, and actually, I should set up a reminder to do it at Planet Scale too. So I am going to leave myself a message really quick in Work Slack for Monday to ask for sponsorship. Let's see what I can do. So remind me on Monday at 9 a.m. to sponsor Dominic. Or at least see what I can do. I recognize clearly I don't have any decision-making power, but I think that at least with my company being a production user of Go, I should advocate for it. So, cool. Okay. That's that. I'm going to check really quick, my FedEx, just to make sure they haven't driven off with my drives. Still on vehicle since 5:41 a.m. Okay. Beats me. So it will land around 118. So the new release of Static Check. Cool. Sounds good. Making your company sponsor Static Check. So CockroachDB does sponsor Static Check. Was the best thing that I ever did. Yeah, for sure. That's great. We had a sponsorship at Fastly and DigitalOcean at one point. I don't work for either at this point, so I can't say. But I will certainly inquire about Planet Scale. You appreciate the love? Yeah, not a problem at all. I am buying 4 18 terabyte Exos X18s. 45 drives, yeah, I wish. I'm not Linus. I don't need 1.2 petabytes in one chassis. Frankly, my ZFS needs are pretty minimal. The Fastly sponsorship is still going strong. That's great. I'm really glad to hear that. Perhaps if DigitalOcean is not, I could potentially reach out, but I think at this point, a lot of the engineers I've known have moved on. But anyway, yeah, if your company writes production Go, you really should be sponsoring Dominic's work because, he is actively saving your engineers from making mistakes. So, new life goal: hopping from company to company, incepting new sponsorships at each company like a little sponsorship goblin. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I wanted to look up the GitHub Actions and see which kind of CI runner, what kernel we have, because I want to be able to assign a loopback. GitHub Actions, Ubuntu latest. Seems like a good place to look. Virtual environments, 2004. Yeah, no, I feel like I need 2110. It's problematic. If I do a mini DigitalOcean home lab, 45 drives might sponsor that. Their stuff is super cool. I can't justify even more than 4 hard drives for myself. I'm jumping from... So I had 4 terabyte WD Reds, 4 8 terabyte WD Reds, and now 4 18 terabyte Exos X18s. I can't justify all that space. It's cool. Don't get me wrong. The nerd cred is totally there, but picture from their website. Yeah. All right. Let's look at it. Let's, oops, wrong window. There we go. Holy crap. So that's it's 3 racks full of 45 drives chassis, and those all hold at least 45, 60, or 60 drives. That's insane. Yeah, they make really cool kit. I can never justify it, though. It doesn't make any sense for me. So this is a bit disappointing, perhaps, if we can't get a new enough version in CI for the loopbacks to work. Slightly concerning. I suppose that we could just skip for now until a 2204, but that does kind of stink. So, for example, if I run this on my machine, I'm running 2110, so I'm on kernel 513 HWE. Everything seems to work just fine. They're lacking in blinking lights. Hot swap chassis are better for nerd cred. I think the 45 drive chassis are hot swap. It's just that you have to pull the entire sled out, and the sleds are incredibly heavy and possibly oversized as well. But yeah, I think if I were ever going to do a rack mount chassis, I would go for maybe a 4U, just because I could get bigger fans in there and then fill up 4 bays or something. I don't know. I could see my next server being rack mount chassis. Well, not that hot if you have to take the lid off. Oh, so you mean like hot swap as in like, yeah, you can pull out the front. Yeah. I mean, SATA drives are still hot swappable, but I understand what you're saying too. So we are going to, for the integration test, we're in a bit of an unfortunate situation where we can't bind a loopback. So I guess the answer, listener unblock accept timeout. This integration test must be run in a guest. I don't think that is the case anymore, so I should try and fix those too. But let's take a look at this test specifically and see if we can fix it. A front loader, yes. Yeah, makes sense. So we're going to drop some, well, I guess the Go version is fine because, again, it's the kernel version that's biting us here. So, okay, we are going to look at this test. So unblock after close is the, right? Unblock, accept timeout. So new listener. Yeah, we're trying to bind to the local host. Yeah. Skip device error. Okay, so if errors is, well, I hang on a sec. You will talk to Frederick about sponsoring polar signals. Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. You know, I certainly would commend you all for doing that as well. You know, it doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be like a massive financial commitment. Like I know Dominic has like, you know, different sponsor tiers and such. And certainly I imagine that he offers, you know, there are different things he offers between GitHub sponsors, or et cetera. But certainly if your company is deriving value from his work, I do believe the right thing to do is to sponsor. So Go 1.12 test. So will the test pass? They do. Okay. So I don't want to use errors is. So that error is a bind. Listen. Bind listen. So if error equals Unix E adder not available. Is that the one? Cannot assign requested address. Yes. Okay. So the kernel version. So this is static check right here. Actually, you can see this in VS Code. So empty branch SA 9003. What is special about 1.12? That's the first version that has all the runtime network polar support we need. So if it's reasonable to support just 1.12 as a minimum, like I don't really need the errors is stuff here, then I'm just gonna do it. You know. Does this wrap its error? It probably does. Yeah. Have to do the same thing here. The kernel in use is too old to support loopback binds, so this test must be skipped. Kernel version. Kernel. Let's get the uname here. Actually, that would be a good idea probably for debugging output. So, nope. Yes, actually. Func uname. UTS name. Okay. Top loaders can still be hot swapped. The HGST is a great JBOD. I don't need to look at rack mount chassis. It's unnecessary. Print an informative message. So UTS name, Unix UTS name, error Unix uname, passing in the UTS name. We are performing the system call to get the kernel information. T.fatal F failed to get uname. Error. Let's see here. So now we have. So I need to have a little helper here that will turn these into strings because these are annoying arrays. So func. Just call it str, I guess. Yeah, these are annoying 65-byte arrays. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Actually, I suppose if they're just arrays, I can slice into them and convert them, right? So kernel. What do we have here? Node name release. So we probably release version, sysname, node name, release version. I actually don't understand man2 uname. Linux. Okay, release is what we care about. So kernel %s is too old to support loopback binds. Skipping. AF vsock. And we just want the release. Okay, so UTS name, release. We slice into it, and then we stringify that. There will be some null at the end here, I think, but I think the string conversion handles that, right? You referring to lights and nerd cred, but you know what I meant, yeah. Matt would have to dedicate streams to talking off static check if I wanted to fill up one of those servers, yeah. Yeah, those are expensive. I know, so Linus just bought, what, 60, 20 terabyte Exos drives to the tune of about $35,000 US. Like, that's pricey, man. That is a pricey one. I'm gonna move this outside the block really quick because I just want to see what happens. Kernel, too old to support. Yep, perfect. Okay. You're looking forward to the LTT video in 2 years. We lost 1.2 petabytes of data in one chassis. Yeah. So for those who aren't following Linus Tech Tips, I guess one of the reasons they're building a new NAS is because they have 2 existing ones, but they were not running ZFS scrubs and they were not paying attention to drive failures. So they lost at least one VDEV and they were not scrubbing their disks either. So really, really bad situation. So if you're running ZFS, you got to make sure you're doing scrubs and you've got to make sure you're monitoring the status of your drives because if you're running a 15 wide RAID Z2, you're good as long as 2 drives fail. But if the third one fails, which I guess happened to them, you're toast, So it sounds like they were talking about possibly hiring like an IT person to like manage that. And frankly, they probably should, but anyway, kind of interesting. 45 drives failing. I think they said they had like 8 or 10 failures in that chassis, but yeah, it was still too many, like definitely a problem. And they should have picked up on it sooner, but skip, tests with new listener, loopback, bind on old kernels. Okay. Right, so this should make the Github action pass, I would hope. You know what? I think now would be a good time for me to start a cup of coffee. So this is gonna take, at least like probably 5 minutes. So I tell you what, I'll go start the kettle, I'll get that going, and then I will come back for a couple minutes and I'll make the coffee. So we'll be in and out a couple of times, but all right, be back in a bit. I brought it into the room to let it finish. It's almost done. See, just doing my Hario V60 here. Don't have the perfect angle for it, but sorry about that. I am truly a caffeine addict, and when like that 1 or 2 o'clock mark hits, I get like, oh man. So a little bit of scroll back here in the chat. Mostly people complaining, should have made instant coffee, would have been done by now, espresso, all that stuff. Mark did not know about vsock itself. Can do a quick read. Yeah, it's cool. I linked some resources a little bit ago, and there's stuff on mdlayer.com. Check that out as well. Dominic, thank you so much for the sub. I appreciate that. That is amazing. Thank you. Yeah, so scrolling back down. Your hearts can handle that stuff, Kaivo? Yeah, it's kind of all about finding the right ratio and like what works for you. Like for me, I do 20 milligrams of ground coffee and then 300 milliliters of water. Or 20 grams, not milligrams. 20 grams of coffee, 300 milliliters of water for a 15-to-1 ratio, and that comes out really good for me. So, and yeah, so I mentioned in the chat, I made it 9 days without coffee once. That was really rough. I was trying to figure out why. All right, hang on one sec. Done here. A little bowl. There we go. All right. Pour over done, coffee complete. We can hang out. So I mentioned, let's see here. Yes, I made it one time like 9 days without coffee. I was having a lot of heartburn stuff. I was having a lot of like heartburn problems and stuff, and I was trying to figure out the issue. And there was a little bit where I didn't have to work. I didn't really have to do like a whole lot of like programming, typing. So I decided that I was going to stop drinking coffee and see what happened. Well, it turns out that like really my issue is I need to make sure I don't drink coffee on an empty stomach. So I always make sure I have breakfast first, make sure I got something on my stomach, but otherwise I'm totally fine. So cheers. 109 degrees choice. You can drink it right away. But I had coffee withdrawal migraines for 8 of those 9 days. Yes, I had pretty much continuous headache, continuous grogginess for at least 7 or 8 days. And I think by about day 8 or 9, it was starting to break. But I had realized that like I was still having trouble. So what ended up happening is I actually ended up having I had like a surgery on my throat. The muscle that opens the valve at the bottom of my esophagus into my stomach was not working properly. So I ended up having a surgery to open that up and rework things a little bit. And that was pretty intense, but things have been significantly better ever since. So, yeah, I don't really have as much of a problem anymore, but yeah, 15-to-1 coffee ratio tastes great. I don't get a whole lot of heartburn, like I said, as long as I'm just careful about like making sure I have some food in my stomach. Totally fine. I should see Fatih's setup. Yeah, I know Fatih is very serious. Fatih is the reason I started using a scale. Fatih is the reason I bought an Akaya scale, second of all. Yeah, he kind of schooled me on that because at first, when I first started making coffee, I would just eyeball it. And Fatih insisted I buy a scale, and I didn't believe him, but he was right. So, are those socks null behind you? No, it is not socks. It is just it's a little piece of cloth. Yeah, a little sentimental piece of cloth. Imagine if people talked about meth like they talk about coffee. Yeah, right. Oh, I love coffee. Got this cool mug from the Marquette Food Co-op in the UP. There's this company like SHS Stoneware or something. They make all these really nice mugs with like the cool like raised, pattern. I like that. All right, that's good. Feeling good. Good to go. Let's get back to it. It would appear the new test is still queued. Oh, no, it failed. Failed to create vsock listener bind. Cannot assign requested. Oh, so was that the one I just sent? So it still failed. Okay. As of the latest commit. Skip tests, yeah. I could have sworn I was returning a net op error anyway. The problem is I don't have a machine with an old kernel here at home to test with, so I have to just run this in CI over and over again. Failed to create the vsock listener bind. Okay. I actually thought we were unwrapping this properly, but it would seem not. Okay, we're gonna have to do this old school. so the raw error, NixOS ships 414. I don't want to set up a NixOS thing right now. It would be op error. Okay, so we have the error, and then we have the op error, specifically the inner. I feel like that's going to give us all the info we need. So just for the time being, we're going to go ahead and amend and force push, and we'll amend and force push a couple more times. See, what I should have done is been running this crap and making sure this worked while I was making coffee, but what are you going to do? Yeah, so if the vsock library is 5 years old, wow, that's insane. I've been doing open source, I think, since 2012 was the first time I did an open source contribution. I didn't realize it had been that long, though, since I like authored some of these libraries. Like, I know Netlink now. I think I started Netlink in 2016, even. So that's even older, which is just wild, you know. But close out a couple of these really quick. If we have to skip the test in GitHub Actions, that's kind of unfortunate, but I don't want to go through the trouble of doing anything else. Like, I'll just fix it in a couple of months when 2204 comes out, or yeah, 2204. Yes. The next LTS, whenever the next LTS is available, I'll just do that. This is still fail. Oh, that's right. I just added the logs in and actually fix it. Net op error. OS syscall. Oh, so it's a damn syscall error is why. I see. So yuck. This is why we errors as syscall. That's an OS syscall error, right? Yeah. OS syscall error. OS syscall error. Yeah, this is pretty gross. You did not know OS syscall error is a thing. Yeah, that's a thing I had just forgotten. Actually, I knew that. I just had forgotten that I was wrapping it. Yeah, I think the general philosophy is that all the high-level ops should not return like error nodes directly. You're supposed to return OS syscall error instead, basically. So the bind failing. That should fix it, actually. Or this should fix it, actually. So the error becomes the inner error. So either these both succeed and we unwrap the inner error, or they don't. And so I suppose probably what we should do here is invert these conditionals a little bit. So simplify the flow. And then if not okay, t.failf failed to unexpected inner error for net op error. Just a little more detail there. And then I can switch on this, I think. Let's see here. So Christopher says, have you moved to a new house apartment? I remember your last review. Yeah, I moved to a house. I bought a house in April of last year. I think I've only done maybe 4 or 5 streams at the house. So it's been a little bit, but yeah, I moved to a house last year. I think I may have done like a stream pretty soon after I moved in, but then for a while I just wasn't really feeling open source and stuff. I needed a break. But yeah, I'm in a new place. So welcome back to the stream. We'll do a switch because I don't like if else. Unexpected system call error. vsock listener system call error. I feel like this is pretty reasonable, I suppose. So you have the inner net op error. You have to unwrap that to a syscall error, and then you finally check the syscall error in this case. Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. It kind of sucks that it's a little bit verbose like that, but it is what it is. Okay, this should make the test pass, and then hopefully we can get back to doing some stuff. So, yeah, how's everybody's Friday going? You know, folks in Europe and stuff, I'm sure, are just kind of winding down for the day. Here in the United States, we're Eastern time, getting towards the afternoon, West Coast in the morning. How's everybody doing? Hope folks are having a nice day. Definitely thankful for a day off, thankful for a chance to stream, and thankful for a chance to send a large data bank a raid in a couple hours here. It'll be fun, you know? So, cheers to that. Check one more time on FedEx. I feel like what's going to happen is they're going to run to my door, knock really quick, run away, and then I got to deal with it. Still on delivery. Okay. Gotta wait. Such is life, I suppose. Protecting Git tags is finally coming to GitHub. Interesting. So only admins can create, modify, or delete tags, so you can give someone else write access, but they cannot tag a release. I like the idea. That makes sense to me, because ultimately, especially when it comes to like Go modules, being able to tag a release is a fairly big deal. Knock knock, who's there? Not your delivery. Lol. Exactly. Damn it. What the heck? Oh, Kernel 5.11 Azure. I guess I should trim the trailing, shouldn't I? So let's see here. Bytes trim right. All trailing from the cut set. So yeah, right. So we take this 65 byte array, we slice it, we trim all of the trailing characters, all the trailing nulls, and then we stringify it. I believe that is finally good enough. Yeah, so you can see GitHub is, or Actions are running kernel 5.11 Azure. So I wonder if I bet if I look at the kernel like changelog or something, or the vsock module, you can probably see when loopback binds were added. But those are new. I had no idea they existed. I mean, I guess they didn't exist up until a recent kernel. My desktop's on 5.13, so 5.11 is surely new enough, right? I don't know. It doesn't seem so, but I suppose for the time being, I'm just going to skip this and then maybe do a little bit of research. But I would like to, if possible, actually tag the 1.0 here and then fix up CI later. You know, that's kind of where I'm at. So I guess it's possible that their kernel is not configured for things like vsock as well. Oh, you know what? We had talked about, so GitHub Actions, environments. We had talked about a container runner versus a VM runner, right? So this is not what I was looking at. VM runner. GitHub hosted runner. Ubuntu latest, stable. Linux greater than 5.6 introduces a new transport called vsock loopback. Oh, thanks, Dominic, for the assist there. That's interesting then. That would seem to imply, yes, that this should be doable in CI, but perhaps it's misconfigured. Is there a kernel flag, or is there a... that is a quote, not a greater than. Yes, I see. Yeah, right. So Linux 5.6 plus, so it should be fine. Okay, well, the integration test passes for now. So test passes for now, yeah. So I'm going to leave that alone. Actually, I'm going to double check that output really quick. We can see if we can loop back on that. It is something I would like to investigate, yes. Okay. For the time being, I don't know if Azure is doing something special, right? So actually, wait, you know what's weird about this? The net test listener test con must be running a guest. That I don't think that's any longer the case. Let's remove that check and see what happens. Probably the same errors, I would guess. Skip host integration. Skip host. Yeah, so we should be able. We shouldn't have to. This integration test must be run in a guest. Is hypervisor. Huh. So my machine seems to be running. Hang on a sec. Dash run test integration con syscall. So my machine is running this test just fine. The CI system is not. So something is different about the vsock module configuration on my machine versus the CI system, it would seem. That's strange. I don't understand. Because these tests originally, yeah, they would look to make sure you were running them in a guest, in quotes, but that should no longer be necessary, I wouldn't think. Yeah, I'm not sure, gang. This is this broken pipe thing would be incorrect too. When we have to check for a syscall error here too, I think. It's just really quick. I want to see what this does. Because we just found out that the net op errors are wrapping syscall errors, right? So, yeah, broken pipe. Log printf, give us everything you know about this net op error. Is this a bare syscall error? It is. I think in the netlink package, we had some sort of behavior where if a netlink error contains a bare syscall, that means that the kernel told us that. So for example, the call succeeded, but that is the kernel reporting to us that it would not complete our netlink request for various reasons. I don't recall having that concept in this. So the fact that that isn't wrapped in a syscall error seems suspect to me. I think we wrote this code last time we were on stream, but now this is giving me pause. I mean, clearly the test seemed to pass, but I don't like it. So we're going to need to investigate that a little bit, I suppose. This op error, yeah, this is ugly. Error is error now. E bad F, E not con. Yeah, I hate this function, this op error. Like, trying to get this right was also really hard. I think this is another thing that probably needs to go into the socket package, like handling this, because like if you get an E bad F or a closed, or you know, used to be you had to match on the substring here. Yeah, it's gross. This whole function is suspect, so this entire function is suspect and should probably be looked at carefully, especially with Go 13 plus error wrapping. Eventually, this net op error logic should probably be ported into MD layer socket, because similar checks are necessary to comply with nettest testcon. Yeah, this is ugly. I don't like it, but I'm gonna leave it to do. Add to do to op error. What's up, Jerry? Your ad just made me want to get McDonald's. I did not run an ad, so it was Twitch automatically. But good to see you, man. Yeah, I apologize for the Twitch ads and stuff. It's I don't know. I can make a little bit of money off this. I'm putting it back into like sponsoring Dominic and stuff. I apologize for the ads. Is what it is, I suppose. You know what I should have done is I should have made it so it ran an ad when I was away. So that way it wouldn't run ads for a little bit. It's just Twitch being shitters. Yeah, that's the truth, man. That is for sure the truth. Pulling without. Oh. Yeah, you know, I want to rebase. I prefer a rebase pull. Git config global. There we go. Okay. That would have been planning. You don't do that. Yeah, it's true. I'm not a full-time streamer. I'm just some random guy sitting in his house here, writing Go, complaining about, you know, GitHub Actions and kernel versions and that sort of thing. So, you know, I do what I can. So does VSCP, does this thing like build right now? Yeah, it does. Okay. Listen. Yeah, so something we need to figure out. Here is the problem. The one API thing I want to break is this. So listen accepts a port. And what we were doing for like a long time is we get the context ID and we pass it for you. So that is a behavior it would be nice to preserve. But the problem is that I believe that the value for, I believe the 0 value is a loopback bind, question mark. Hypervisor, so the 0 value is a hypervisor bind, a loopback bind is 1, a host bind is 2. So, but I don't think that hypervisor is basically ever used. So I feel like, how do I make this, what sort of API makes sense for this, right? Like the common use case is going to be, I think a host bind, a bind to your own context ID. The common is going to be an automatic bind, right? So it's going to be a bind to the context ID, which is either going to be for a guest, it's going to be 3+, or for the host process, it's going to be 2. But we want to enable loopback or hypervisor potentially as well. So I feel like probably what we want to do is type context ID. And I think we want to make an iota here. So auto. I think we want to do this and then not map these directly to the operating system constants, because like automatic should be the default. Hypervisor, loopback, host, and then anything else I guess becomes guest, right? I feel like this is the only reasonable way to do this, because we want the 0 value to be the use case that most people want. You know? I almost started writing a Rust comment there with 3 slashes. Okay, so on context ID is the VM socket's context ID value. Specifies a VM socket's context ID value. But this is actually not the context ID because it's the type. Shoot. So this is the type of the context ID you want to bind to. You love that the second Google hit for vsock is my package. Yeah, I actually the author of the vsock module like listed this like on the wiki and everything is like the, you know, it's pretty cool. Like this has seen some pretty serious use, I think, which is awesome, you know. So a context ID, maybe I should call this like a listen type or something, like to avoid confusion with the context ID constructor. Yeah, I can't have the, hang on a sec. Context ID redeclared, so I can't do that. Type listen type. listen type specifies the VM socket's context ID value for the listen constructor. Maybe. Let's just roll with that for now. We can always rename. So the context ID for this system will be automatically discovered and set whenever listen is invoked. What's up, JonesCoo? What plugin is the wrap comments you wish that was built in? Yeah, me too. That is something that actually Dominic helped me find again last time. That would be rewrap by STKB. Can I provide a link to this pretty easily? Copy the extension ID. Yes. Yeah, I love this extension. And then you press Alt Q and it will reflow. So I know this is silly, but I still use 80 character limits even on my, I've got 4K monitors here. But what's cool is that when I'm not streaming, I can have up to 4 panels side by side, all with text. So you'll notice I do have this gutter here that shows like when I get over 80, and I can just if I break this, yeah, it'll reflow automatically, which is great. So big fan, big fan. Be automatically discovered and set, whatever. Will be automatically set as appropriate whenever listen is invoked. For hypervisors, this will typically be host. For guests, a unique context ID per guest will be used. For processes on a hypervisor, this will be set. Host will be inferred. For guests, a unique context ID per guest will be used. That makes sense, right? The modern man uses something like 120 instead of 80. Yeah, I like 80. I feel like 80 enforces good discipline. I have seen too many people, especially when it comes to like error messages, like they reach way across the screen. Like I want to find an example now so for example, this line right here, I feel like this is like already annoying. Like even in a smaller editor, it's like there's already a fair amount of noise here. And I feel like using an 80 character limit encourages better habits, But I wrote that line. Yes, I did. Yeah. And actually, can I reflow it like this? I could if I want to. I'm not going to. Let me show you something I did in. Speaking of which, hang on a sec. So we haven't mentioned it, but for those of you who are IPv6 fans, Corrad, I tagged 1.0.0 the other day. So hooray! If anybody here is running an older version of Corrad, I would highly recommend updating. At least in NixOS, unstable, it's packaged. In Alpine, it's packaged. If you're building yourself, I apologize, but yeah, 1.0 is released. Been running this for a couple of years now. Pretty excited about it. Very cool. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is I wanted to look at the source code. There is, let's see here, system, the Linux addresser, or is it the... No, maybe it's in our plugin. Is stable. Yeah. So this function, for example, I wrote this recently, and no up used to align feature checks and comments false or, and like I have this, and like this is like a one-liner, but I personally think this is like pretty good style. Like I feel like this is quite readable. Every case is clearly explained. You can tell that it's like a continuation like this. I personally think this is a pretty good example of like how to break up a one-liner. And yeah, so I like this. I was satisfied when I wrote this code. Similarly, I still think this function is incredibly clever. We're using the method expression syntax here. So netedder IP is private. By calling it like this, you create a method expression that will take the netedder IP as the first parameter and then the Boolean. So I still love this snippet of code. I tweeted about it at one point. Sorry for the light mode. Should be the default. Let's go through my media. No, go away, please. Thanks. Why can't I look at my own? Are you serious? Really? I have to log in to look at my media tab? Anyway, so let's go back really quick. So nice little view of my backyard. Pretty cool. Fat bike, also super cool. Very fun. I love it. Planet scale, pretty dope place to work. I'm looking for a certain thing. Rust, rewrite it in Rust, everything. I think this is cool too. Rust is dope. Sensors, more fat bike. Unsafe YOLO fun with generics, love it. I'm looking for a certain coffee, can't beat that. Tattoos, yep. Standard live, yeah. Where is this? There it is. Okay, finally found it. Yeah, I tweeted this. 90 likes, check that out. Isn't that super clever? Like, I want to print this out and frame it. I feel like it's just so elegant. I love it. It's slightly different now just because of the fact that, it's slightly different because now we're using the system IP type in here because I have to get a hold of the flags, but I still think it's super elegant. So you're still running DNS mask and you feel dirty, but you think you can get away with it at home. Yeah, I mean, that's totally fine. Use whatever works for you. I wrote CoreRed because I thought RADVD was cool, but I wanted more info. Especially there was a while where my ISP kept dropping my default route, and I wanted to find out why. And it turns out that getting a new modem fixed that problem, so it's like, whatever. But I still have monitoring. It will tell me now, like, whenever something happens. Actually, you know what does happen is DHCP CD will sometimes stop delegating prefixes to all my interfaces. So my physical LAN will get a /64, but none of my VLANs will. And I have no idea why. And it just seems to happen. So now CoreRed will actually alert me. I get a Prometheus alert. I restart it. Things are fine. So it's been useful. Dominic says this is a nice application of first-class methods. Yeah, I agree. I was incredibly super happy about this. Like, I feel like Go is not always a very elegant language, but I really like it. So you've never written comments in between logical ops. That's cool. Yeah, I thought that for example the code I previously showed. Yeah, I thought that was a good example. I have to run to the bathroom. I'll be back in just a second. I'm gonna get some more water too. So all right, BRB. All right, we're back. The coffee is working fast today. Yeah, pretty much. As long as it's not systemd, an older version of systemd had an overflow bug where it got a /56 from prefix delegation that it thought was 0 prefixes. Interesting. Frankly, I had been intending to switch to systemd's DHCP v6 client. I was just kind of curious. Like, I don't need to run like their RA daemon because I'm running CoreRed, but for the client side, I was intending to give it a shot. So that's good to know. I will be careful about that. The cool thing about NixOS, for example, is I can switch easily. So it occurred to me that I had shown this function, and we've been talking about it for like 5 minutes, and I didn't actually explain what it does, so I probably should. The idea with this function is if the user tells us that they want us to automatically assign a IPv6 DNS server, recursive DNS server, and their interface has multiple addresses, basically the job of this function is to determine which of those is better. The idea being, first of all, we look for IP stability flags, which indicate, for example, the address is probably meant to be stable and long-term. We look for next a unique local address, which if it's assigned is probably going to be used for internal only services like your DNS. Then we look for a global address. Pending no ULA being available, global seems like a pretty reasonable choice. And finally, we're going to use a link local, which does work, but the problem is it doesn't actually work across different subnets. So I actually ran into a bug with CoreRad 034 where it was sending the link local address instead of the ULA because the link local had flags that indicated it as being more stable. That's actually fixed in 1.0 now. So CoreRad on my machines, given a ULA assigned, will pick the ULA address exclusively for the DNS server. So effectively what this does is we're going to prefer private addresses first, which ULAs are considered private by the NetEdder package, and then global, and then finally link local. And then if literally nothing else matches, we just do a less than comparison. So for example, if you have like a local host, ::1, we compare by bytes. And that's it. So I think this is a pretty clever function. And then the stability function here, if the address is valid forever, is statically assigned. If the kernel is managing the temporary addresses for it, it's probably the inbound address, which is good. So we want to use that. Or if it's assigned with stable privacy, that indicates that the kernel generated like a random number and has assigned it as like a stable address. Seems good. And finally, if it just looks like an EUI64, which is the older standard before stable privacy, we use that. So I think this is some pretty clever logic and I like it. But here I go rambling on about IPv6 and we are doing a vsock stream. So hey y'all. Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the stream. So, right, we were fixing this. I think we're going to have like, this listen type or something. Or maybe we call this like a bind, like vsock bind. Because that's really what you're doing is choosing the address you bind to, right? Let's go with that. Specifies the vsock's context ID value, which will be used to bind an address for the listen constructor. I am getting a phone call. Oh, sorry. I can wait a little bit. Do you know how everything in Unix is a file? Sometimes you think everything in Linux is a socket. Yeah, I mean, with stuff like, netlink, vsock, there's AFL, there's XDP. Yeah, there's a lot of different socket types for sure. Okay, so binds. So auto bind. The context ID for the system will be automatically set as appropriate whenever listen is invoked. For processes on a hypervisor, host will be inferred. For guests, for VM guests, a unique context ID per guest will be used. Makes sense. The context ID for the bind let's see here. The context ID will be bound to for use. So the thing is with the hypervisor, I feel like it's confusing because like that's supposed to be the hypervisor process itself, I think, which is pretty unusual. So communicate with the hypervisor process. Will be, the context ID will be bound to the hypervisor process. Most users will want auto or host instead. The context, does iota not work if you add spaces? Oh, no, it's because okay. For the time being. ID will be bound to the local, to a system loopback. This effective system loopback address. This allows two vsock VM sockets to be paired. Let's see here. So these constants are for listening, right? What does the API for dialing look like? Yeah, so the API for dialing, you have to always specify an explicit, oh shoot. Yeah, so that's why I had these named constants before. Yeah. Because you choose to dial either to the virtual machine by its context ID or to the hypervisor or similar, like hypervisor host. Yeah. That's a good point. The problem is the behavior I'm trying to preserve here is that if you give the 0 value, it's automatic. and automatic being whatever makes the most sense. So, but for dial and automatic bind doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, well, shit. I guess the problem is here is I'm trying to make it easy and perhaps abstract away these constants, but I need the ability to, I would like to be able to share the same API between dial and listen. I guess what I could do, I think there was a user who had proposed creating like a listen loopback or similar, but I didn't really like that. Because nobody else is needed. Is automatic listen really that useful? Yes, because like automatic listen will give you whatever is most appropriate for your system. So for example, if you're on the hypervisor, it's going to bind to the host. If you are on the hypervisor and not the hypervisor process, it binds to host. If you are in a virtual machine, you have a context ID of 3 or greater, it's going to bind to that. So yes, automatic listen is useful because that is almost certainly what you want. So yeah, I guess maybe I keep listening at the same as it is, and I add a second set of constructors for like loopback, because I guess listen and listen loopback. What happens if you bind to host inside of VM? I think it will just eval or similar. I don't actually have a lab set up for this at the moment, unfortunately, but I'm pretty sure it will just eval. So I suppose the way we could test this is we could try and bind to a guest context ID from the host, right? That would also work. So I've got this thing. Let's try and bind to 3. That shouldn't work. So yeah, I broke it. Okay, really quick, we're gonna restore this, hide this. I just want this to build. So the hypervisor wants hypervisor, the host wants host, the VM wants a context ID, and people who write tests want loopback. Yes, I believe so. The tests, my unit tests at least want loopback. I frankly don't see any reason you would use vsock loopback versus like a Unix socket, but perhaps there are legitimate use cases I'm not aware of. So I guess perhaps creating a second constructor is not so bad. So we want to, is there ever a reason for the hypervisor to bind to a host or the host to bind to a context ID? I don't believe so, because I think the hypervisor process would always bind to, hypervisor. Nobody's written a hypervisor in Go, I don't think, so I'm not sure how that would work exactly. The host to bind to a context ID that is not its own. I don't think so for example, right here, I'm trying to have the host bind to 3. We're going to find out what happens. Yeah, so if we try and bind to 3, it gets cannot assign requested address. So the host, this is a host process explicitly, cannot bind to a context ID in the guest space. It gets an eval. The more I think about this and the more we talk about this through, I'm leaning towards having that second constructor for a loopback. I feel like that probably makes the most sense, because otherwise, like, the automatic behavior is what people want, and nobody has ever asked for anything other than loopback. Automatic works for everybody except for a loopback. You're with 2 functions? Yeah, I think I am too. I didn't want to, but I think I've talked myself out. I think I've talked myself out of it. Okay, so with the hypervisor process. Note that this is different from a process running on the hypervisor machine. You know, once in a while, the rewrap plugin will like break your text like this a little bit, which is annoying. Most users probably want to use host instead, right? Note that this is not the same as a socket owned by a process running on the hypervisor, Most users would probably want to use host instead. Most users should probably use host instead. Makes sense. Loopback specifies that a socket should communicate with a matching socket on the same machine. This provides an alternative to Unix sockets or similar, but is unlikely to be useful outside of a testing context. I can't think of any reason. So, process on the hypervisor on the host machine. Most users should. This is the correct choice to communicate with a daemon, communicate with a process running on a hypervisor from a guest using a socket dialed from a guest. 0x0. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was a total mistake. Thanks for catching that, because that would drive me crazy too. Yeah, so I accidentally had 0x01. I think my tendency with hex is to always pad out. Like I don't tend to like this because this is kind of not precise. So for example, if I have a uint16, I will always write it like this because I feel like this is just more clear. Because if you see this, it's like it actually means this, but in my head for some reason it could also mean this. So I prefer to be more explicit. But yes, my apologies. I had intended for that to be small like that. Okay. So let's fix everything we've broken so far. So we're not going to break the API at all, actually. We are going to... we're not going to break the API, I don't think. Because we're going to create a new one for listening loopback, or perhaps just listening on an arbitrary... Maybe it should be a listen loopback. Maybe it should be a listen arbitrary context ID. I don't know. I'm not sure. Assign a port automatically. Specify 0 for port. The address of the server can be retrieved using adder. Yep. Resolve hypervisor versus default ambiguities for committing to this new API. Yep. Well, we resolved it by deciding we are not doing this. So the direction we chose, we are not doing. Okay. Continuing onward. So we fetch the context ID always. Every time we call listen, we always fetch the appropriate context ID, which is going to be host on the host, 3+ on any of the guests. I have no idea how you would get hypervisor out of this, and you wouldn't get loopback out of this either. So I guess we add probably listen loopback. Do we add listen hyper? No, I don't think that makes sense. You know, let's go with listen loopback. We're gonna go with a phrase that my old friend Antoine taught me. You ain't gonna need it. Yagni. It's the best. Listen loopback. Listen CID. Yeah, I thought about it, but I'm not sure it makes sense. Nobody in 5 years has asked for this in any context outside of loopback, and loopback is still relatively new, I think. So I feel like perhaps it's just not necessary, you know? I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong here, and if somebody strongly disagrees, so please do speak up. But my gut reaction here is that listen loopback is sufficient. So I suppose what we can do. You suppose that listen CID would generalize listen loopback? Yes, it would. Yeah. So if we want to tag a v1, is it not a bad... I mean, let's say we add listen loopback, and in 6 months, it turns out we need listen CID. We deprecate it? I mean, or it just becomes like a wrapper. I mean, the standard library has small wrappers for stuff all the time, so it's probably okay, but... I don't know. Listen CID is future-proof for all the weird things you might want to bind to. Yes, that is correct. You're right. All right, you talked me into it. Thank you. Thank you all for, honestly, one of the really cool things about like Twitch chat is that it just forces you to consider different perspectives and to, it's just, it's useful. I feel like we produce better software. I will document this and say most users probably want, sockets using the appropriate, inferring the appropriate context ID value for this machine. Opens a connection-oriented net listener for incoming VM sockets connections by inferring the appropriate context ID for this machine. The port parameter specifies the port for the listener. To allow the server to assign a port automatically, specify 0. Yep, this all seems reasonable. You know, I'm going to actually move this incoming VM sockets connections. Listen automatically infers the appropriate context ID value for this machine. Users with well, I also mirror to new functions like to dial. Dial already supports a context ID because for dial you have to know who you're dialing out to. Make sure you name it listen CID and not listen context ID. Haven't seen you use the term CID anywhere else. Oh, make sure I want to name it. Yeah. So I see what you're saying. I feel like a longer name is probably reasonable. CID. I use it for like internal variables, but all the documentation pretty much says context ID. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Listen context ID. Simplifications. By calling context ID before and passing that value to listen context ID. Callers with advanced use cases such as binding to vsock to loopback, setting a context ID, such as using the loopback context ID, may wish to call listen context ID directly. May wish to use, okay, so listen automatically infers the appropriate context ID value for this machine. Context ID for this machine. By calling context ID and passing that value to listen context ID. Callers with advanced use cases such as using the loopback context ID may wish to use listen context ID directly. That seems pretty reasonable to me. Listen context ID is the same as listen, but also accepts an explicit context ID parameter. You feel okay with this? Cool. Good deal. This function is intended for advanced use cases, and most callers should use listen instead. Advanced use cases, and most callers should use listen instead. I feel like that's pretty reasonable. See the documentation of listen for more details. Okay. So now the integration tests are going to do a loopback bind always. So listen context ID. 283. This is good. It's explicit, which is nice. Listen context ID, vsock, loopback, 323. Cool. Everything passes. That's good news. Got about an hour before probably about another hour and 15 in the stream. I suspect probably what we'll do is we'll go until about 3:10, 3:15, give Large Databank some time to get his stream going and started, and then we'll send over a raid. It'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so I need to change VSCP back from, yeah. Good call on listen CID, Ember Kabadi. Yes, I agree. Yeah, good call. I think that I'm afraid of providing like too much power. Is there a similar issue with dial? No, I'm sorry. I think I thought I mentioned it, but perhaps not. If I go to dial, so dial always accepts an explicit context ID. Oh, but I call it context ID in this case. Let's keep that for consistency as well. Context ID. So it's an explicit context ID parameter. Yep. Yeah, so dial always takes a context ID because if you're in a virtual machine, you want to dial to the host most likely, and if you're on the host, you want to dial to any number of virtual machines. You can dial either way. So as a result, it makes most sense for dial to always take a context ID, and it doesn't make any sense for you to dial your own context ID. So loopback is something you could do, I suppose. Actually, we should make sure the tests are calling loopback then. Find to loopback for all integration tests to avoid the need to run a hypervisor and VM setup. Yeah. So this will be the address. Yeah, so when we vsock pipe, the loopback address will be passed in, so it will dial loopback anyway. So context ID will be loopback. I suppose I could ignore it. Will always be loopback. I suppose I could ignore it and just pass explicitly there, but I feel like this is also fine because it's just getting the address of the listener itself. Cool. Okay, we're doing good, gang. I feel pretty good about this. I'm gonna move my panic F declaration down. Yeah. Okay. Listen port panic F listen context ID loopback. Note that this is not the same as a socket owned by a process running on the hypervisor. Most users should probably use host instead. Makes sense. Socket should communicate with a matching socket on the same machine. This provides an alternative to Unix sockets or similar, but is unlikely to be useful outside of a testing context. Yeah, I can't think of any reason you would use a vsock loopback. Actually, Dominic, I'm curious now. So you mentioned there's like a vsock loopback transport or something. I just want to look it up really quick. You got me curious. What was that called? I'm scrolling back up through Twitch chat at the moment. Did I miss it? Let's see here. So vsock loopback transport. Aha. Linux 5.6. Yep. So Stefan, is this Stefan? I believe Stefan. Oh, this is a Stefano. This is different. This is a different author. But okay. So nested VM support, local communication support. Sweet. Okay. SID local. So it's called local. It's not called loopback. So we should call it local because that matches. This feature can be useful for testing and debugging applications. So yep, without running VMs. Okay. Other context IDs can be used for the same purpose, but it's preferable to use local. Okay, cool. libnbd vsock support. Yeah, because like network block devices can work over any transport. That's something I'd like to try in Rust too, because I've got my network action. I've got my my Rust program is generic over any sort of reader or writer, so it should work for TCP streams as well as like vsock streams. But for the GitHub action issue, can it be because the port is 0? So 0 seems to be commonly used for binding to whatever you would like. so I'm not sure. Oh, this is wild. Hang on, multi-transports, so you can use vsock in nested VMs? Really? That's wild. From the man page, the special constant. Yes, so I actually set that constant on behalf of the caller. I don't know if I've shown that today, but yes, I do set that. So if I go to dial, no, not dial. It would be listen. Hang on, I'll pull it up. Yeah, so if port equals 0, we specify port any. -1 in Go is really awkward. I feel like in Go, 0 values are much more often used for the magic. So this has been this way ever since I first released the library. So if you specify port 0, it does port any instead. So. What was I got? Oh, loopback. We've been calling it loopback, but the documentation calls it local. We're going to call it local too. With a matching socket on the same machine. This provides alternative Unix sockets are similar. And may be useful in testing VM sockets, applications. Yep. Rest in peace, people who want genuine port 0. I don't know if you can bind to port 0. I don't think you can. And I feel like, there's such a common Unix convention of like you bind to :0 and you get a random port anyway. Like I feel like it just makes more sense. But I suppose I could be wrong. We renamed, so loopback bind to local. Did you know that you can use port 0 in TCP to accept path role filters? I did not know that. You can actually bind or dial to port 0 in TCP. Really? I honestly thought it was always the magic. I thought that like dialing to port 0, like issuing a connect sys call to port 0 would just be an e inval, and listen always creates a computes a random port. So I had no idea. Let me make sure I got all the terminology stuff changed. So local, bind to local, context state, loop back. Yeah. So loop back. Okay. So we changed the documentation. We're keeping hypervisor. We are changing to local and host. Curl commit. Oh boy. Except port 0 reported by Brad Fitzpatrick, of course. What the heck? I don't even know how you would get a bind to 0. How would you get a bind to 0 if all the Unix APIs give you a random port? I don't even know how you would do it. I mean, as far as I'm aware, anyway, I guess it's been a while since I've messed with bind directly, but. Let's see here. So to allow the server to assign a port automatically, yep, that's still correct. Listen automatically infers the appropriate context ID for this machine by calling context ID and passing that value to listen context ID. Callers with advanced use cases such as using the loopback, we got that wrong again. Loopback. Local. Local host VM. Okay. May wish to use listen context ID directly. When the listener is no longer needed, close must be called to free resources. Yep. It's the same as listen, but also accepts an explicit context ID parameter called context ID because we've been calling it that in the exported API instead of CID. This function is intended for advanced use cases and most callers should use listen instead. See the documentation of listen for more details. Okay. Yeah. This all looks good to me. Okay, so vsock. Restore listen API, add listen context ID. Shoot, with that, I feel like we might be pretty close to making our tag here, as long as everything passes. Because, oh, you know what? I feel like we don't need these anymore. I think there were a couple other things. Yeah, these used to be called reserved, but I don't think we need these shut RD and shut WR. I feel like I added that. Shut RD, shut down, vsock.go, vsock.go. Let's see here. So shut down. I added support. But I think I also added closed read, right? Close read, yes. Close write. So I added explicit APIs for that so we can get rid of the constants too, which is good. Okay. I broke a test. I still forgot another loop back, huh? Local. Tests, we'll do an amend because we're still on a branch and we're YOLOing this pretty hard. Okay, force push, and then we have another commit for vsock. So we're switching close, read, write to socket con methods. Yep. Because again, socket con's job is to take care of all that nasty for you. I still don't like the state of the op error stuff, like we talked about that earlier, but nobody's complained about it in quite a long time, which leads me to believe we're pretty good at complying with netcon. Yeah, listen local, dial timeout. I don't understand why. And file listener. Mostly on hiatus from open source. Yep. Please continue to use your fork for the time being. Yeah, why do they want a file listener? Yeah, this is no longer gonna fly because this is different now. Yeah, why would they want a file listener? Systemd socket activation for vsock. Interesting. Huh. I feel like probably what I should do is I should tag 1.0 and then reevaluate this because it does seem kind of reasonable. I told them to use their fork for now because I was going to make big changes, which I have. Are all the tests passing? So integration tests. So we're still a little broken because of the Azure kernel, whatever. I'm not really sure. Yeah. Integration test must be run in a guest. I don't like it. Yeah, the tests are still a little funky. I'm gonna, okay. Being worked on in 46. Oh, this is gonna close. Okay, so this is going to close the other one. So closes 45. So this is about ready to be not a draft, I think. We've got GitHub Actions now. I think this is pretty much ready to go. Listening on port 0, use IP tables magic and rewrite packets. Yeah, that makes sense. Or you can do it with like BPF as well. I had a little bit of an experiment with that a little bit ago. But yeah, it just seems to... I feel like port 0 is one of those things where it's like, it'd be too tainted on the internet to like actually use. Like, I don't know. So for example, like, you know, I know like, you know, 4 zeros, you know, 0.0.0.0 is like your any address kind of. Can anything else in 0/8 be used? Like if you were to assign like 0, 1.2.3, it is a reserved port. Ah, interesting. I wonder what Brad ran into where he wanted to deal with that because that's ugly, man. Ugly, ugly. No bueno. So we are deleting 1,500 lines and adding 477. So that's pretty good. I'm happy about that. And some of these are just like, you know, your GitHub Actions. So Yeah, vsock replacing with package.go.dev, GitHub workflows, new links. I think we're pretty close to 1.0, folks. Package is only supported in Go 1.12 plus. Older versions of Go lack critical features and APIs. Yep. Linux. So glad we can get rid of all this old crap. All of 0/8 is reserved for the current network. Interesting. Current network. It's also a shame that all of, isn't it like 169/8 is all reserved too? Or is that 169.254/16? Who knows? Maybe they'll try to reclaim that for more v4 space like they tried with 127/8. Yeah, maybe. 169.254/16, right. The answer is IPv6. I've been telling people for years. Yeah, so SocketCon supports... Okay, so I had forgotten. SocketCon supports network namespaces, and I feel like using a vsock with a network namespace could potentially be a reasonable thing to do. So how the hell do we do that? I feel like at this point, I think I might actually have to break the API and add an options parameter or something, because like I can't think like a config parameter. But that would allow for future expansion, right? So that seems pretty reasonable to me. So for example, like SocketCon MD layer socket supports just at network namespace at the moment. I apologize, coffee once again. BRB. All right, we're back. 20 grams of coffee, 500 milliliter. I drink a lot of water too. I'm actually pretty good at hydrating, powerful coffee. You all are pretty funny. Anyway, yeah, so adding a config struct is something I'm going to want to do, because somebody's going to ask for network namespaces, somebody's going to ask for some bullshit, or like a syscallcon hook and dial, and the only way to do it is going to be to have a config struct in a forward compatible way. And frankly, I was going to be pretty pissed off if I tag 1.0 and then have to add listen config, listen context ID config. It's ugly. So let's do... So I guess the question is, now that we have listen and listen context ID, do we add the config parameter to both? I guess, assuming you want advanced use cases, maybe you want to call it listen context ID. I don't know. I feel like adding it to both is pretty reasonable, because it is something that you're going to want to have, probably. It's always been part of the netlink package. Maybe you can let config to only context ID. Oh, interesting point. So I get rid of the second constructor. I make it so that the context ID is part of the config. But the problem is with that is we run into the same issue as before, where we're trying to have two different APIs, with the same set of constants, and hypervisor takes 0. So we would have to do some magic. So I'm actually not sure that's a good idea in this case. I think that probably the correct answer is to add a config, make it empty for now, make it nillable default, and then, to do network namespaces probably. Yeah, I can't think of any. I feel like keeping the constructors we have is the right idea, because the context ID thing needs to either be explicit or implicit, unless we break the constants, which we don't want to do. We've already figured out, because we want to keep them for dial. So I feel like we have to just add a config to both. I mean, it's a small break, but it'll be easy to fix, you know. So unfortunate, but we'll just copy exactly what Netlink is doing with the same plumbing. Right, so this was a mistake. The Netlink package, this socket abstraction has led me to so many headaches. This is going to be one of the first things I kick to the curb into 2.0 for sure. So such is life. Netlink 2.0 could potentially happen with generics. I don't know yet, because you can't have generic methods. So the idea I had immediately for attribute encoding and decoding isn't going to fly. So we'll see. I don't know. Type config struct, I suppose. We'll do that. And then where is the config? It's at the bottom of the file. That doesn't seem like the right spot for it. I don't like that. But anyway, here we go, gang. Type config struct. Config contains options for a con. Oh, you know, shoot. Netlink only has con. This has listener and con. So do we want different configurations for the both? They're both calling it a socket con underneath. Is it possible we'll get into a situation where we want an option that only applies to listener, only applies to config, and it will be, or to dial, and it will be confusing? Do we want a dial config and a listen config? Does that suck? I feel like that sucks. What do you all think? We're gonna add listen config. We're gonna have to add listen config. We're going to want to add dial config because there's no, or don't crypto TLS and NetHTTP reuse the configs for both. You're remembering a similar API to go standard lib. Yeah, so you know, actually, the way this works in the standard library is there's the net dialer type. So I suppose I could make a dialer type later on and just leave this for the listener, but I have no idea. So then you would call dialer dial, and this gives you all the config. For listener, listen config. So maybe I do make listen config. I make a listen config struct, and I make it a mandatory parameter. You're thinking of net HTTP requests. So we have a few choices here, right? I guess probably writing them out is going to be the most reasonable thing. So option one, we vsock, listen, this is a pseudocode config, vsock dial, host 0, host 1, 2, 3, 4, config. So let's see here. So JonesQ crypto TLS. TLS config is config. Listen. Dial. Yeah, I guess TLS does use it for both. I'm just concerned. Okay, so that's good to know that there's precedent in the standard library. Client server configurations must set deprecated. I'm wondering if any of these only apply to client or only apply to server. After a client hello is received from a client. So this would never apply to a client, right? So get config for client would never apply to a client TLS config, right? Sorry, I closed Twitch chat for a sec. How many options is vsock really going to get? I don't know. So we're in a situation where we've never had options, but I want the ability to. I suspect network namespaces are going to be the thing people are going to want because they always do. Reuses the same type for incoming and outgoing requests where some fields only make sense for one or the other. Oh, you mean like net HTTP requests specifically? Yeah. I find net HTTP request kind of confusing to use because of that. Apparently TLS config, you know, I think I am leaning towards a single unified config type, and we just keep it simple. We don't add more options than we need to, and the API remains small, and we document very carefully if something applies to only client or server. I think that's pretty reasonable. You know, to do MD layer. Are TLS config and HTTP request both by Brad? HTTP request probably is. I think TLS config is probably Adam Langley. Version 1.1, Funk, listen with better config. To do MD layer. Support for network. Socket config, netns, most likely. If I add this struct, so it's going to be empty for now. Config contains options for a con. Although no options are present today, this struct is... I don't really want to add network namespace support before I have to, but I feel like somebody's going to... I don't know. The socketcon library supports it, no problem. Pushing that down was really nice because that is a total pain in the ass, and network namespaces suck. They're not very fun. So... Google style guide says your docs should not talk about the future. Ah, okay. Good to know. As you said before, allowing config only on listen context ID as it is for advanced use case sounds better. You think so? I guess, like... I feel like it sort of leads to a weird asymmetry if I don't allow it on listen, but at the same time... the existing API for listen has been fine for like a long time, so I don't know. I feel like the asymmetry, I feel like breaking people temporarily is probably worth avoiding the asymmetry, is my gut instinct. But if anybody feels really strongly, please do speak up. It's options for a con, support for there. Plumb through if it makes sense. I'm leaving docs and for myself about the future, but okay. We're doing it. I think we're gonna add it to both. I feel like that's the most reasonable way, because otherwise it's just it feels kind of awkward, I feel like. So we are gonna break people, but it's gonna be a really easy fix. So it is what it is. Add it to both. Yeah, you agree? Okay. Config specifies optional configuration for the listener. If config is nil, a default configuration will be used. Config, yep. You don't want to lose auto just because you need a config. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, that's actually an excellent point, because as soon as you need a configuration, suddenly you've got to call context ID yourself and plumb that. Yeah, I think that it makes more sense to do this. We'll deal with it, you know. But adding the config struct now guarantees that we don't break this for people in the future, because we can add fields just fine. Because if somebody's using the unkeyed literal syntax, which you should never use, that's your own damn fault if your code breaks when you upgrade. Whenever people write like test tables with like really big like anonymous struct literals and they use like the unkeyed literal syntax, it just grosses me out. It's like, just put the names. Like, it's not that hard. Use autocomplete, you know? It just feels weird. Is this gonna make the docs display weird if I put the to-do in there? I don't know. Find out. Also has an explicit context ID parameter. You don't do that. Oh, so you don't put... Hang on. All right, let's go look at it. Dominic H, go tools. The type definition is right there. I mean, yeah, but as soon as you add a field, I feel like it's gross. All right. Internal. Robust IO. What do you got? No. Shared check. Where are your tests? Sync. Good luck finding tests. Static check. Lint test. Hey, no, see, you're doing it right there. Oh, but test util. Anyway. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I feel like unkeyed literals are a mistake. I feel like naked returns are a mistake. I feel like named returns are almost always a mistake unless, you know, like it's one of those things you kind of get used to with Go where you stick with it. You know what's funny is I left myself a reminder in Gopher Slack this morning for the stream today. Double check vsock reads on error. We were having a discussion in the networking channel where we talked about the fact that even if your read returns non-empty, if your read returns a non-nil error, you're still supposed to check if any bytes were read. So for named returns, if you need descriptive names or defer but don't use a naked return, yes, I completely agree with you in that case. Config. So we're gonna plumb config into both. Really quick. Okay, so I do return n op error. Okay, that's good. So these are correct then. That is correct. Okay. I think we can close that. We're gonna go full screen because I want to copy the docs. Adam Langley, Crypto TLS Part 1 plus config struct. You're not sure if Adam or Russ Cox used the TLS config first, though, for the client and server, not Brad. Yeah, so Brad's first commit is after they stopped using trailing semicolons. Yeah, so Go technically has semicolons as part of its grammar, but it's able to mechanically insert them because of the format of the code, which is very clever. And whenever I write Rust now, I don't write semicolons, and it's silly. Config specifies optional. Config specifies optional configuration for the con. If config is nil, a default configuration will be used. And most likely the defaults will never change, but it is, however, why you need to return false or instead of just doing return. Sorry about that. That was my watch. I actually did the return false so it would line up more nice. So that was intentional. Do I still have that up? Return false. Yeah. So no op used to align future checks and comments. So I did that on purpose because otherwise the first check had a less level of indentation. I wanted all of my comments and all of my checks to have the same level of indentation. So that was intentional. I know it's weird. I feel like I'm actually kind of surprised static check didn't flag this, but I don't know. I'll leave it up to you to determine if you need it. I could not just do return on a single line because that would insert a semicolon. Yes, correct. VM socket server, the context ID, import parameter should be listener. Address of the listener. Dialing connection from the hypervisor to a virtual machine, the VM's context ID should be specified. If dialing from a VM to the hypervisor should be used to communicate with the hypervisor process, or host should be used to communicate with other processes on the host machine. That's still fine. That all still applies. You can't flag it now, so you've demonstrated valid use. I'm glad. I felt like perhaps stylistically this is a little ugly, but I thought it was worthwhile instead of having IP valid forever and then other stuff. Line 147 deleted a bracket. Yes, correct. Thank you. I sometimes hit shortcuts in my editor that I don't understand, or some, just fat finger a couple of keys. Coheed and Cambria, huh? This is all over the place today. Let's go back to... That'll work. Something a little more chill. Okay, cool. Config gets plumbed into here. So now we will make things compile. Compile, damn it. Okay, vsock 164. Let's see. Config. So just for config equals config. I suppose right now this would still be a no op, wouldn't it? Okay, so to do md layer config default nil check and initialize pass options to socket config where necessary. Yep. So the config parameter is currently unused, so I will leave it underscored. That's good. Socket takes a socket config, which is just the network namespace at the moment. God, that, I'll tell you what. With netns. Okay, so run a go routine, lock the OS thread, make sure you get the current local one, unlock the OS thread, set the network namespace, attempt the kind creation within it, restore the network namespace, close it. We're done manipulating this now, so unlock the OS thread, or if it failed, we keep it locked, so that way it terminates the go routine, or terminates the OS thread. Yeah, it's nasty. Beyond this point, the thread's network namespace is poisoned. Do not unlock the OS thread until all network namespace manipulation completes to avoid returning to the caller with altered thread local state. Yuck. You lost me at lock OS thread. Yeah, I'm really glad I moved it into the library because socketcon is much more capable of handling that sort of thing than me copying and pasting the same, 50 or 60 lines of stuff. Integration tests. Okay, got to fix them all up. No big deal, I suppose. No configs. 233. So I think the only breaking change is going to be the addition of the config parameter. I suppose I should document that in the change log would be a sensible place to do so. Okay, all the tests pass. Initial stable commit. Let's see here. I'm going to pull up the netlink change log again so we can copy, because I like keeping the same style between my stuff. Cannot rebase. Okay. Sometimes the git bash prompt thing, I think, makes git a little funky. Let's see here. Initial stable commit. API change. New API. The vsock listen context ID function can be used to create a vsock listener, which is bound to an explicit context ID address rather than inferring one automatically as vsock listen does. API change, the vsock dial and vsock listen constructors now accept an optional vsock config parameter to enable future expansion in v1.x.x without prompting further breaking API changes. Future expansion, prompting further breaking API changes. Yeah, so we are breaking one thing. For now, this value may be set because vsock config has no fields, has no options as of this release. Nil may be passed in all call sites to fix existing code upon upgrading to v1.0.0. I feel like that's still pretty reasonable. It's super easy. Like you add a comma and nil to every place you use vsock listen or vsock dial. Like, I don't think that's a big deal at all, you know. It's unfortunate, but it's way better than me adding more constructors later on, you know. Okay. API change, new API, version 1.0. Shell stable commit. Okay. So back to fixing compilation. We broke VSCP probably. I haven't tested this in quite a while. I suppose, you know what? I suppose I could test it with loopbacks, couldn't I? Let's do that. That would be a good idea. Listen context ID. So you either, the context ID could be auto or local, I guess would be the intent here. Context ID of the remote VM socket. I kind of don't want to like fix this right now. I don't know. I guess we could test it, but I think for the time being. So let's just bind to vsock loopback, or local rather. And then nil because there's no configuration. So we are getting very close, my friends. This is exciting. Okay, oops, closed out my windows. That's good. vsock. All right. vscp receive. I forget exactly how this works. Command vscp. I usually would send over like something from proc just for funsies. vsock command vscp. And then we send. We're sending it to local. The port of local is a random value. And checksum hash. Yes, this is a little funky. I don't think this is and send. Test. Hello world. Yeah, so that works. Cool. Good deal. So verbose and then checksum afterward. So this does work. That's good. I will fix this up a little bit. So hello world, control D, the checksum of the data. Yeah, because there's a little bit where I think I was like corrupting data, sending this back and forth. So listen, port nil, to do MD layer, support vsock local binds for testing. Yep. Okay, we are in good shape. Right. So local binds, we fixed up all the APIs, we added the config parameter to everything. Config, default nil check, and initialize, pass the options to socket config, yes. And then the listen function actually needs a similar comment. Should I delete the option since it will not work? Which option? I did not modify like VSCP at all. Like right now you have to, actually, you know, if you do like a host-host, it actually might work unchanged if it binds host-host. No, so that option, the -c option is necessary because if you're dialing out to like a different VM, you do need it. So let's try really quick. Okay, so for some reason it thinks that my system is a guest. Maybe because I didn't mod probe the kernel module for vhost. Maybe that's why the tests were passing earlier too. There's still some stuff to investigate here. I'm gonna leave it alone for now. I'd rather tag a version of this that works than try and troubleshoot my system. So yeah, but it should all work as is. Like VSCP can be fixed up. That's whatever. It's just a testing utility anyway. I did want to fix listen though because calls to listen will be passing a parameter. Yeah. Yep. So much the same. We need the same Same listener Linux, con Linux, FD Linux, context ID. Where is, I have the listener, con Linux, okay. Yep, much the same. Config, default, nil check, and initialize, patch the options to socket config as necessary. Yes, okay. Yeah, thank you all for the, thank you everybody for all the advice today and the double checking. I certainly appreciate that. There have been a couple of things today where I could have easily missed it myself, where I'm really glad we discussed, for example, the new API. I think it makes a lot more sense that way. So thank you all for bearing with me. We'll be wrapping up stream fairly shortly here. Hopefully just tag a 1.0, send everybody over to large data bank. That'd be fun, you know. But we've still got probably another 20, 30 minutes, so no rush on the way out. Happy to be of help for once. Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. And thank you for the great stream. Yeah, thank you. This has been a ton of fun. I hopefully I imagine that on these days that Planet Scale gives us off, I will probably be streaming a fair amount. So here's hoping that keep finding things to do and keep finding motivation, you know? So config specifies optional configuration for the listener. If config is nil, a default configuration will be used. Yep. So we gotta change the doc. This is why I read my diffs. For a con or a listener. Thanks for the stream. Yeah, thanks for sticking around. I'm not leaving quite yet. I appreciate it though. But if you're taking off, then hey, take care. But yeah, I'm still hanging around for probably another 20, 30 minutes. Yeah, we're gonna send a raid to large data bank. So that'll be a lot of fun. So yep, no rush, not leaving quite yet. It was just thanking folks while I was thinking about it. Let's see here. So do I know when I'm streaming again? Yeah, I was just pulling up my calendar. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I would guess probably sometime. It'll probably be at least a week, maybe next weekend at some point. Like for example, like next Sunday the 13th is the Super Bowl here in the US, so it's like I might be hanging out with friends at night, but I could stream during the day. I don't know. It's a lot easier for me to stream during the day. No, I'm actually looking at a calendar. I'm looking at my calendar. It's a lot easier for me to stream during the day. I don't really like doing it after work because I'm usually pretty spent at that point. And then doing it on weekend days can be hard sometimes because you run into just busy with other plans, you know? So today was the perfect day to do it. Could do it during the middle of the day, feeling good, up and awake. Doing it after work is just hard, especially for folks in Europe. It doesn't make sense. So next weekend, you're streaming ski jumping, so you have no time. Oh, nice. That sounds rad. Best of luck. Be safe. This tag is bothering me a little bit. Let's see here. So socket listener. Config specifies optional configuration for the con if config is nil. And then an optional configuration for the listener if config is nil. Okay. Making sure the docs are okay. Yep. So listen context ID. Yes, this is where we break the API. So vsock, add config, pass to dial, and listen star. Yep. All right. Yeah, again, slightly unfortunate to break the API, but now is the best time to do it before a 1.0. So I cannot think of anything. I'm going to close all these tabs, I think. We're going to close everything to the right. I love that shortcut. I can't think of anything at this point that is blocking us from tagging a 1.0. I believe we have cleaned up everything sufficiently. There are still, I guess probably the last thing to do would be to kind of comb through every file and make sure things are in shape. You know, we got the GitHub workflow set up. VSCP is fixed. It's not quite correct yet for loopback binds. Oh, this can go away. This was a jank. I had for Go 1.11, we keep trying and blocking, and that can go away. That's good. So let's get rid of that. Fix the tests. Oh, that wasn't even in use, apparently. Was it? Oh, VSCP was using it. Ah, I see. Yeah, that can go away. So L accept. Timeout. Oh, right. Yeah, we support setting a deadline. I think the listener actually supports setting deadlines too, doesn't it? Did I add that? I might have forgotten. Because SocketCon supports it. The listener does support deadlines. So L set deadline. Timeout. Deadline. Failed to set listener timeout. Oh, you know what? That doesn't make sense because we've already accepted a connection. You know, I'm just gonna ignore that for now. I'm just gonna pass this directly to. Yeah, we'll check the diff really quick, but I don't feel like that was important. I think that a lot of this stuff was meant to just paper over some of the deficiencies in the older versions of Go. Yeah. Listener will be closed after the timeout expires, even if no connection was accepted. Yeah, so... All right. Nah, we're just gonna leave it. I don't want to mess with this right now. So that can go away. Everything builds still correct. Okay. Internal vsutil. Remove old accept helper. Push. Yep, accept a single connection, receive the stream from that connection. Yeah. I guess just to make sure we didn't break VSCP, we can do the modify it in place again. Right. VSCP, VSCP receive port 1234. VSCP. This was supposed to be like a vsock SCP was kind of that's where the name is derived from. Send 11234 test. Okay. Yep. Good deal. That still works. Okay. Close everything. We fixed those. We fixed vsutil. These are all test related things. Yeah. The test could probably still use some cleanup, but that's not part of the API, so I don't really care that much. We've got new build tags. We're plumbing and config properly. We are constructing this. We're using the SocketCon. Okay, so this dot comment is old now too. What does netlinks dot comment say these days? Oh, network namespaces. I'm just going to get rid of this because the README says the same thing. And package.go.dev shows essentially the same things as well. So that comment's just going to go away. Doc. Sock remove stability from doc.go. The VSCP change goes away. We push again. So many commits. But I guess that's good because there was a lot of work that went into this. FD, Linux, context ID, ioctl, Uint32. Yeah, I had to go through and fix up the ioctl helpers in xsys because they were technically incorrect. They worked, but they violated the unsafe pointer rules. So we now have this ioctl PTR, which follows it correctly. So all kinds of fun, huh? Actually, speaking of which, DV, give me everything that is updated, please. Because if we're going to tag a 1.0, then I want to make sure we are up to date. Tidy, test, build, tidy again. You still have to write a check for the ioctl. Yeah, that would be a good one. It's definitely a very subtle thing, and it's like I found several places in the standard library even where it was incorrect. So, it works, but in theory it's not supposed to, or it could break at any time. So bump dependencies. What's in my Go mod anyway? Not much. Socket, netsys. Okay, that's all fine. Yep. Don't love this, but it can stick around for now. Integration tests, fine. Broken pipe and stuff seems okay. I guess if people start reporting bugs, we'll figure it out, you know. Plumb in the config. So whenever the socket fails here, close, close, close. That's good. Are we doing that on the listener as well? Are we actually closing out the socket if any of the calls fail? Close, close, close. That's good. Same thing in con. Close, close. Okay, cool. We're so close. We're mere minutes away, I think. 2017 and 2022. I like being picky about this stuff because if you miss something small in a 1.0, then it can be pretty bad if it's in the exported API, you know. Stable v1 API and any future breaking changes will prompt the release of a new major version. Features and bug fixes will continue to occur. 112 plus. Yes. Good deal. Some of these are like, I used to write tests with kind of like a different style, especially this, CMP diff. Okay. Yeah, seems okay. On implemented, I used to do this a lot. I don't know how I feel about it, but so Darwin go build. Yep. Broke the Darwin tests. vsock others. Yeah. Broke my shims here, so I gotta fix these. Config. Okay, 95, 164, those are fixed. So as long as the Mac CI passes, then I think we're okay. vsock is not implemented on, right? Coming up on 3 hours of stream. Oh, you know what I should also do? I should run gofumpt on this. Gofumpt LW, that'll tidy. I like it. Okay. vsock fix non-Linux build gofumpt. Gofumpt is a really nice tool. So Daniel Marti, gofumpt. This tool is great. You can kind of think of it like a Go format plus. It will tidy up lots of really annoying things like trailing and leading and trailing like blank lines and function bodies, and it'll group imports or it'll group constants and stuff like that. It's really nice. I would highly recommend this tool. I, for one, love mechanically enforced style, and I love being really picky and opinionated. It's just frankly who I am. I guess for me, I see software as like a craftsmanship thing. And would recommend. It's a great tool. And with that, as long as CI passes, I think we're pretty much ready to go. I guess we'll check the publicly exported docs one more time just to make sure we're not exposing anything we're not supposed to. But I personally can't think of any scenario. It has a great maintainer too. Yeah, Daniel is a really wonderful, a really great dude. Really have enjoyed getting to know him at various Go conferences and such. Speaking of which, I will be at GopherCon US in, it's not Orlando, it's like outside of Orlando. That'll be cool. So if you are coming to GopherCon, please do say hi. That would be great. I would appreciate it, you know. I've had folks come up to me before and or like, you know, approach me online, be like, oh, we talked at GopherCon, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't remember. But I always appreciate meeting folks, and it means a lot to me if, you know, people say, hey, they like your stream or like your work. It means a lot to me. So yeah, I appreciate that, and hope you come say hi. You know, you want to go to GopherCon as well? Yeah, it's great. It's a lot of fun. Eukinus, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Right at the 3 hour mark. Let's go. Cool. Yeah, so we'll be wrapping up fairly soon here. We're gonna tag 1.0 pretty much and send a raid over to our friend large data bank. But that being said, still got a couple of minor things here, I think, just to look at. Do I need this anymore? I feel like you can add an option to VS Code to make Go please use GoFumped. I should do that. That would be a smart idea. I just want to double check here what the netlink package does for syscallcon, because I feel like I might be able to get rid of these two. Yeah, so oh, you know what? But the error handling, yeah. So I can't quite replace it, but I'm calling syscallcon on the socketcon, right? Yeah, so the socketcon gives us a raw connection, and we're embedding that raw connection with the addresses. Yeah, so this is correct, actually, because we want the ability to add op error information. So, for example, if we have a local address or a remote address, we want to add those to our errors. In the case of the netlink package, we're not trying to comply with netcon or anything. But for these, it's nicer if we give more details, so you can tell like which socket is connected to which. GopherCon is cool, but when you've organized SocketCon. Love it. Yeah, this is this socket package, like this is my unsung like favorite thing I've done, because it saves me so much effort everywhere else. Yeah, I've made a lot of progress with it for sure. So that's pretty cool, you know. I wonder if we could let's leave it to do md layer, see if we can port smarter net op error with local remote address error logic into socketcon's syscall con type to avoid the need for this wrapper. Just something to think about. An address has a context ID and a port. We have the hypervisor localhost, file name, context ID. I think we're done, gang. I believe we are done. Let's take a look at the... So I'm going to leave that to do for myself. I'm going to check the docs, and we're going to go over just the whole git diff, and then we're going to be... That's going to be the stream pretty much. So leave to do for syscall raw con. So our exported API looks like the following. Address implements net header, con, netcon, listener, net listener. We have hypervisor, context ID, address, config, con, which has a dial constructor, which takes a context ID, a port, and a config. Listener, so we have listen, which is port and config, or we have listen context ID, which is more advanced. Context ID, port, config. Looks good to me. Will I come to Europe again sometime? Yes, I hope so. I believe that, let's see. I think the plan for GopherCon Europe in 2020, I presented a talk on my, let's see here, my Sched group type. GopherCon Europe 2020 was online. This has been really, the talk Skodoc thing has been really flappy. I feel like I got to find something else and fix that. That's annoying. But I did this presentation where there's a YouTube ad. Oh, I have YouTube Premium. It's like, I haven't seen a YouTube ad in a long time. Anyway, so I did this presentation online about my Sched group package and what I learned building that. And that was originally going to be at, I believe, GopherCon Europe in Berlin. And I was really, really excited about that because I've never been to Berlin. I have lots of friends there, Go friends, Go community friends. Of course, COVID hit, never ended up working out. So I do hope to be back in Europe for a conference. I would love to come to GopherCon Europe in person or similar, and I suppose we'll see, Do you live in Berlin, Gary Onion? That'd be cool. Yeah, I'd love to go hang out with folks. I know tons of Prometheus people from there. People from different open source projects in the Go community. That'd be really great. Why is this complaining? Package vsock. No, package is found. Okay. Yeah, gang. I think that we are ready to review this. So assuming every check has passed, which they all are, I think we are ready to merge the rewrite. Just gonna do a quick scroll through this. I really find that it is beneficial for me to look at my diffs. Like, I know I just wrote the code, but looking at the diff as a whole is nice. You don't live in Berlin, but it's 2.5 hours via train away, and it would only be 1.5 hours if the first train wouldn't be so slow. Gotcha. Oh, that's cool. I definitely appreciate how, like, you know, much more friendly, like rail friendly, like Europe is and everything. The United States, you can take rail places, but it's really slow, like really bad. You can't wait for 101 in a couple hours. Yeah, you're probably right. But 1.0.0, initial stable commit, dial and listen now accept an optional vsock config parameter to enable future expansion in 1xx without prompting further breaking API changes. Because the vsock config has no options as of this release, nil may be passed in all call sites to fix existing code upon upgrading to 1.0. Makes sense. Create vsock listener, which is bound to an explicit context ID rather than inferring one automatically. Yep. New badges, new stability section, new changelog. Possible this is out of date. Yeah, we don't know. VSCP, people have written enough code with this at this point that VSCP doesn't seem so necessary. Local binds would be nice, yes. Here's the breaking API change. So, for example, we have listen takes a port and a nil. Dial takes a context ID, a port and a nil, such as life. New build tags, sockets, get rid of all of the old code. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. I used to like do setup in blocking mode and then have like this early close thing, which was like a blocking close, and then switch to non-blocking, and it was just this whole mess. And the socket package takes care of all that for you. So you don't have to care anymore, which is great. This was all, yeah. I used to do this thing where like I would swap out essentially like the syscall layer. So like the closed syscall calls this, connect calls this, and this doesn't really test anything. Like it kind of just, I have never found it to be, now that I've written a lot more Go, I find this pattern to be very unhelpful. So instead of creating an interface, I just write more tests that exercise the system calls, you know, and that works a lot better. So that entire file went away, which is great. All of this stuff about Go version support goes away, thank goodness. Everything does what you would expect because we're all on Go 1.12. This whole interface goes away, like everything abstracting system calls goes away. Like, look at the red diff. Isn't this amazing? Like, this just makes me so happy, you know? It is a good time. A good time was had by all involved. So your 2021 was a rocky release. You needed 1.1 to fix the version flag, but then it needed 1.2 to actually print the right version. That's great. Ultimately, I would say all things considered, like having the version flag be broken is not that big of a deal. But yep, so all the stuff for 1.10, this 1.10 shim goes away. 1.11, less than 1.12, all of this goes away. Yeah, this is a lot better. Why is xtools in here? Oh, does socket pull in xtools? It might. I may have forgot to fix that in socket. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal. I'll deal with it, you know. But integration listener, unblock. Yep. So if you get a deadline, you need to be able to unblock accept. Test listener. Syscall con, the easiest thing to do is the buffer size. You can verify the buffer size actually works. Broken pipe, sure. Cool. Context ID. Yeah, check the kernel. Yeah, we'll have to look into this. It's an unfortunate CI thing, but I'm sure it's fine. Yeah. This is looking pretty good to me. Yeah, so you'll see this listen FD interface gets replaced by socket con, which basically does the same things, but socket con way more efficiently abstracts everything basically, except with no flags because it already. So socket con accept, just to double check, hang on. Socket con accept should set all the flags we need, I do believe. Yeah, flags ordered with the default socket flags. Okay. We're good. So you can tell this is significantly simpler than before, which is great. Lots of deleted code, better docs, more expansive API with the config. I feel really good about this. I think that people are going to be excited about this. People have been using this for quite a long time, and I think that they're going to be excited there's a stable release. Yeah, probably end up with like a 1.01 pretty soon for like a bug fix, but that is what it is, you know. I think it's gonna be nice. Local remote, yeah. So this rawcon wrapper exists to provide better errors. Reserved became local since the last time we updated. Yep. Entire function is suspect. Isn't that great? This entire function is suspect. Sweet. I'm calling this good, gang. We're going to merge this, and we are going to tag a v1. So, wait, I have to do a git commit, don't I, to tag a v1? So, all right. Do I have to do a commit, or can I tag the v1 on the merge commit, actually? I might be able to do that, right? I'll just rebase and merge instead of a merge thing. Actually, no, I think I want the merge commit because that would be a good place to put to tag 1.0. Okay. So that is now merged. We're going to pull this, and we're going to try and tag 1.0 on it. Oh, shoot. Master. Well, we're going to fix that too. Main. I have been renaming my stuff for main for quite a while now. We're going to fix that. Master. Oh, you know what? The main. How are these GitHub Actions working then? Were they not? So we need to rename the default branch. Change log. We haven't tagged 1.0 yet, so I think we're still okay, but I am not sure. Linux test package.go.dev. Is there anything in here about master? No. Main? Okay, so we need to rename on GitHub probably. So settings, no. Project settings. Repository name, no. Oh, this panel is a little bit new. Yep, we're gonna rename this to main. Yep. Okay, so git remote -v, git remote, remove origin, remote add GitHub, MD layer, vsock, add origin, git push -u origin head. Okay. So now we are set up to track. So git tag. Assign the tag verbose v1.0.0. Is there no verbose? Maybe. Push and push tags. New tag. Okay, so got it. Change log. First stable release in main. See the change log. Create a release. v1.0.0 stable. This is the first stable release of package vsock. Nearly 5 years in the making. Thanks to everyone who has contributed and provided feedback on this library. See the change log at. Notably, there is one breaking change due to the addition of vsock config parameters for future expansion of options in v1.xx. Apologies, but now was the right time. I'll sweep through the open issues and PRs shortly, and hopefully we can get some more things tidied up. The library has been rebased on my github.com MD layer socket package, which should integrate really nicely. Has been in use in my netlink library for some time. Cool. Make sure you have a valid tag. I see. Publish. Alrighty, we have a tag. It's verified with the committer signature. We have the merge commit, which is where everything comes in. Right. So these never... Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I guess there was talk about adding like essentially a UDP vsock of sorts, like a datagram. It just never happened. But you know what? This is a good time to call the stream. This has been really good. Thank you everyone for joining. This has been super fun. Let's see here. Yes, Large Data Bank is streaming. So we're going to send a raid over to our friend Large Data Bank. So yeah, thank you all so much for hanging out today. This has been a total blast. Yeah, we're going to get that going, and thanks for hanging out. I appreciate you all. Oh, shoot. I undid it, apparently. Whoops. One more time. All right. Yeah, thank you all so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. And yeah, have a nice day, and I'll see you all over in Large Data Bank's channel. Alrighty. Take care.